Welcome back to another episode of the Adventure Athletes podcast. In this week's episode, I sit down with Niall Newport, a movement and injury prevention coach from Bristol. Now, in this week's episode, we dive into the world of injuries, how to rehab them, how to help prevent them, how you can't really prevent them, and we then go into a lot of other things as well based on human movement. And this is quite an exciting podcast because it is the hard launch of his own podcast, which you will learn more about in this episode. Now, before we get into the podcast, I am currently doing a fundraising challenge with Sport in Mind. Now, with this challenge, it's 100k over 10 days. This is something that Sport in Mind have set up to help people, either individually or in teams, get involved with and help people get moving to help with their mental health. Obviously, it being a fundraising challenge, me and Ben from Sport in Mind, among with our teammates, thought it'd be a good idea to up the ante, try and stay ahead on the leaderboard. And what we're doing is we're going to accumulate 1 kilometre for every pound that is donated to either of our fundraisers. We're currently about halfway through the challenge at the moment. I hope we're keeping up with what we've been doing, as this is recorded before the challenge. But yeah, hopefully we're keeping up with however much has been donated. But no matter how late you donate, we are going to keep up that promise. So even if we hit £2,000 donations, we will make sure we cover 2,000 kilometres. Yeah, it's quite a fun challenge, and I thought I'd just play a bit of a promo for Sport in Mind to promote what they do before we get started.
Sport has the power to change lives. Sport is more than exercise. It's motivation. It's purpose. It's possibility. A reminder, you are not alone. We are Sport in Mind. We understand what it's like to feel disconnected. That's why we create spaces to support mental health. We meet people where they are and use sport to help them find their way back. Every step, every pass, every moment shared build something stronger. A community, friendship, a force for good. We are made to move, to feel, to breathe, to connect. Sport drives us, but it's people who inspire us. Every day, every week, they get back up. They keep showing up. They never give in. The strength that lives in all of us. So join us. Stand with us. Because when it comes to mental health, sport is the answer.
And now, enjoy the podcast, guys. What was your call to adventure?
For me, it was probably as a child, I think. So I think from all my adventures I've done as an adult, it's all definitely stemmed from my upbringing. So I grew up on a small holding. I was really lucky to have surrounding fields, a river at the bottom of the house. And literally all of my childhood kind of memories are just being outdoors. Like I guess like a lot of the time I wasn't really allowed indoors. I definitely had that kind of upbringing where it's like didn't really get to watch TV. We had like games consoles and stuff, but it was very much like you get an hour, that's it, and then it's being switched off. Yeah. And then you go outside. So it's just sort of like drilled into me, but like from an enjoyable aspect rather than it feeling like a punishment. And then I went to uni everything just dropped off. I played sport as a kid, like all the time, so super active. Did like scouting, all that sort of stuff, lots of outdoor stuff. Went to uni, classic story, innit? Went to uni, all dropped off. I was playing hockey and I just kind of didn't get on with the kind of social aspect and the pretentious nature of the kind of sports union stuff. And just stopped doing everything. And then a friend texted me out the blue from school who I hadn't spoken to for years, and basically was like, I really want to ride from Land's End to John O'Groats for charity. And you're the only person that I know that would be like essentially mad enough to just say yes and do it and not like think about it. And he's like the most disorganized person ever. So it's quite cool, because I think that was like my first realization of like, oh yeah, that kind of is me. Like that is what I'm like I love all that stuff. I just hadn't really had a kind of outlet for it. And that was definitely my first proper call to adventure. So I didn't have a bike. I borrowed my brother's colleague's like 1980s like iron road racing bike. We started the whole trip. So I hadn't even seen Matt for, I don't know, like 3 years. I met him at the train station in Reading, like taking the train to Penzance to go and start. And then we got to Bridgewater and I'd had like 7 punctures in a day. And basically his bike just could not take all the weight. We were camping the whole way. And I lived in Bristol. So we ended up we had to get the train from Bridgewater to Bristol, which was like really cutting, because it was like so early on to be like, oh my God, we're not even going to get to ride the whole thing. And I felt terrible because it was kind of my fault because I haven't really organised properly. And Matt was frustrated, but being like amazing about, just being like, it's all right. Got to Bristol, had one evening to basically call around all the shops, find out who had a bike that I could buy. And it was like that situation of stupid modern bureaucracy of like, I went to Halfords and they were like, oh, well, we wouldn't have time to build you your bike. I was like, well, can I not just take that one? And they're like, no, that's the show bike. And I'm like, that's fine, I'll take it. They were like, no, you can't have it. So I ended up finding a little secondhand bike shop, bought a cyclocross bike, cost me like 500 quid when I was like a student. It was mental. I sold it as soon as I finished the trip because I didn't really have the money. And we rode, we did it in 13 days. It was like, I don't know, we were doing about 60 miles a day. I mean, looking back, it was mental. Like, had I known, but that's the same, isn't it? That's a true adventure, I think. If you knew how hard it was going to be or how ridiculous kind of what you were taking on was, you wouldn't do it. Or you're kind of roughly aware, but you just ignore it because if you think about it too hard, you wouldn't do it. So you just take it like one step at a time.
This is where I find, because I always say like adventure athlete, they're opposing when you look at the essence of what they are. Like athletes are so structured and rigid in their training to get like the minimal percentages out, and then adventurers are just like, I want to go and explore. Like there's no structure, it's just like I'm out there. So then trying to find that like balance between the two, that just sums it up of just like, well, a real adventure is like you have no idea what you're doing, but like you've done enough like cool stuff that you can just go off and do it. Like you need that foundation to be able to go off and do the fun stuff.
I think it's something that more and more in a, what would I say? Like, I would say nowadays, but I'm trying to put that into a more kind of specific, but in the current kind of way that I feel people are educated, the way we're learning about what life's about, it is very much a very technology heavy world where we kind of rely on data, we rely on progress, we rely on all these things that basically we're taught that like unless we're making progress, then we're not getting better, then we're not improving, and that's an issue. We need to make more money, we need to do this, we need to do that. It's all, for me, it just seems everything's about progress. And the one thing when you do an adventure, the one thing it does is stops your progress. Like there's something that happens along the way that's just you cannot account for, and you fall into that place of being like, all I can do is plan, prepare, or not in my case when I was first doing adventures, but as you gain more experience, if you're pushing yourself harder, is plan, prepare, and then you're equipped in a way to be able to deal with the scenarios. And I think that's just something that we just don't really get given as a skill anymore. This idea of like, what do we do when things aren't going your way? What do you do when things are not as you expected them to be? And I think in a modern world, especially in a Western world, people are really struggling with that now, because we have this kind of everything's there, everything for us. We can just walk into a supermarket, get whatever food we want from anywhere around the world. We can, play video games. We can watch movies that take us to other kind of dimensions in a way of like realities. We can escape as soon as anything is an issue. Whereas when you go on an adventure, you're just thrown into this scenario that you can't just walk away from it. You got to make decisions. Yeah. And I think that's brilliant. And I think you're right. Like the athletic side of it is all that preparation, but then that stops. It's almost like left at the door when you walk out, and then you become the adventurer, and the adventurer is like, let's see what happens. Hopefully. I think if you go out there thinking, well, I've done all this preparation, I know exactly what's going to happen, and this is what I'm going to achieve, and that is a given, I would argue, is that a true adventure? For me, a true adventure is like, I don't know what's going to happen. That's where I want to be, because that's what makes me feel most alive, like most excited about going out the door.
Yeah. I think what you're saying is a massively underrated skill to have, that ability to deal with these situations on the fly. And it's things that, like, we was looking at my climbing stuff before you came up here, and that's what I loved about climbing, and that's why I do like trad climbing specifically, but then I do rope soloing, so it's like just me out there with the rock, and I'm trying to figure out all these systems, and every rock face is different, and you're trying to like learn as you go, and things do go wrong. And like, I've been up a climb rope soloing, and my ropes got caught on the clip below me, so I can't give myself any slack to go up to the next clip and make it safe for me to go down and unclip it, but at the same time I don't want to down climb and unclip it, and you're just stuck in this state of like, what the fuck do I do? Like, and it's like, it's not life or death, I appreciate that much, but like, it's borderline. And I'm not recommending people go out and do that by any means, but like putting yourself in these situations where it's like, I don't know what to do here, and I've got to figure it out, and I'm comfortable with it because I've done it throughout my whole life, and people don't. And when I see people in situations like that, and then they're like, fuck, really don't know what to do, and they just freeze, it's like what you're saying, like they're so used to everything being like solved for them or finding that easy escape. And it's just like, well, this is the fun. Like, this is where the fun starts. Like 100%. You said, that's the adventure.
Yeah, that's total mindset. Mindset. It's total mindset in the sense that when you see that person who hasn't had those kind of experiences, they do one of two things: they freeze or they panic. And neither of those are obviously serving a situation. They're just an emotional response of expressing what their body is doing, which is basically hitting like an adrenaline rush of like trying to fight or flight, trying to escape the situation, or find a safe area again. And we live in such a big safety bubble that most people do have those responses. And actually, to build the skills, it's not necessarily like we all then get that. We all get that adrenaline rush. We all get that hit of like, oh my God, I've got, like, this needs to happen now. Or, we can maybe even start to foresee things because we've experienced a similar situation before. But what it allows a person that's done some form of adventure or had those kind of experiences is to quickly re-regulate your system to then start making those actionable steps before you kind of get overwhelmed with those feelings of like, how am I going to do this, or shutting down, which is what most people do.
Other than sort of lived experience in that sense, then, how would you, like, say someone's like coming up to you and being like, oh, you've done loads of adventures, like I want to do this one, like how do I prepare for it? How can they prepare for things going wrong without like over planning? Like, is there anything that you would advise people, like, oh, like if you try this, then like this might help? Or Is it just something that it's just like you just got to do it and deal with it?
I think most of the time, yeah. I think most of the time my advice is just do it, gain the experience, and then you'll learn. I think we can end up in a world now where there's so much information out there, there's so many resources, and I'm like terrible for this personally. We were just talking earlier about like business and running a business, and I'm a planner. I'm like, I want all my ducks in a row before I go and do anything in my life, but not with adventure. It's really odd. If someone was like, hey Neil, do you want to just fly out to the middle of nowhere tomorrow and go and explore this valley? And, you know, I've made sure we've got all the kind of like things in place, you know, that it's going to be safe or whatever. I'd be like, yeah, for sure. Like, have I ever done it? No. Like, did I know I was going to do it? No. But I know it'll be amazing, and I know that I'll just work it out. But I've like, that's a learnt skill that I've built out of just doing adventures because I just went out and did it. And I've done so 2019, so what's that? Is that 6 years ago?
Yeah, almost 7.
So 6 years ago, I went to Greenland and did some first ascents of some mountains in Greenland. And I had never been on a glacier before. So for most people that have ever done climbing, like in the Alps, there's like a big kind of system you kind of work through. Like, you're a sport climber, then you've got to learn to trad climb, then you've got to do like a course somewhere and start learning how to do like crevasse rescue or like self rescues first in climbing, then you do crevasse rescue, lots of these things, and you go to the Alps and you do a course to learn all this stuff, usually, unless you're very lucky to have friends that would teach you before you're going to even step on the glacier. And I was just like, this sounds like an amazing trip. Just so you know, I've never been on a glacier. Like, are you happy with that? They were all fine with it. It was a team of 4, so 3 other people who had all had loads of experience doing that sort of stuff. I literally went off with another guy called Neil, confusingly, while the other 2 went and were shuffling some bags. So we had like 3 different camps to get up to our top camp. And the first one was down on the beach before we went up onto the glaciers. So while they were hauling bags, Neil just gave me a real crash course in how to do a crevasse rescue. And that was it. And I was like, I was there. But I felt really safe. You know, I felt like these guys all know what they're doing. I was always put in a position where I was the last person, hopefully, to be in a position of having to rescue somebody else. But also, I'd just done it. So it was like super fresh. Yeah. I think you can also go the other way, where you've like done all this research and stuff, and you become so overconfident of what you're doing that sometimes you can see people doing that and they're very unaware because they've just immersed themselves in something that, even though you can research, unless you have experience of it, you never know what's going to happen. So you see those situations where it's like climbers getting really caught out or stuck because they've just become either complacent or they learnt this stuff a long time ago, but they don't do refreshers or, you know, that sort of stuff. You can get stuck that way, really. So my advice is always, just go out and do it. As long as you've got the support that's needed, or you feel comfortable with your own set of skills to deal with the situations, I'd just do it.
Yeah. No, that's kind of what I wanted to hear, because like that's always been my advice. It's just like, just sign up. Like, that's the biggest part. Is like, once you've signed up, you're committed. You're doing it.
Yeah, it's exactly that.
Then you just go and do it. Like I constantly tell people, things will go wrong. That's the point. That is literally the point of going on these adventures. If you're doing like even still, like, I like obviously coach people. They do lots of fitness events, like different things like high rocks and stuff. And I'm like, well, we're going to put a plan in place, like your training plan. And then I'm like, we want the training to be so good that on the day it feels easy, but not in the sense of like it's not going to go wrong. It's just like you feel prepared for it to go wrong. Like we've been saying, and like just training them as much. Like I've heard about it in swimming, for example, and triathlon, where it's like the best ones, like Michael Phelps and things like that, they've trained where it's like, what happens if your goggles come off or there's a leak in them, and like they've trained with like water in their goggles, and everyone's like, what are they doing? Like, and it's like, well, what if that happens at the Olympics? Are you just gonna panic and like freeze like you said, or you gonna like be like, oh, I've dealt with this before because we've done it in training? And it's like, you can kind of prepare for it, but like it's through experience of doing it at the end of the day.
I think that kind of definition and difference between being prepared in terms of your training and making it feel easy on the day versus obstacles coming up that you cannot foresee is such an important distinction. And I think that's really lost on a lot of people, especially when you're new to something, because I think you think, if I do everything, I'll be fine. And you get that a lot, I think. You can hear people saying, you know, or maybe more so from like a younger age where it's like, oh, well, you know, you've prepared for your exam, so you'll be fine. It's that kind of advice. Is like, actually, if you're doing a true adventure, you might not be fine. Hopefully you're not like in a life and death situation, but you can't really walk up, you know, I would never walk up to you on the start of a start line for a long endurance event and go, oh, you'll be fine. It's like, that would just be bullshit. Like, no one knows if you're going to be fine or not. Yeah. Like, you'd say, like, you know, give it your best, or that's a more useful, to me, that's a more useful piece of advice on a start line, or just before you go on an adventure. Yeah. I find it sometimes quite frustrating. It's a bit like the be careful thing. It's like, no one's not going to not be careful. Do you know what I mean?
There's levels to being careful, I think, because there's like...
Be sensible would be a better one, though, right?
Yeah.
Like, it'd be better for someone to say to you, be sensible. You'd be like, yeah, fair enough. I won't take that unnecessary risk. But someone saying be careful is like, well, I'm obviously always going to be the most careful I can be. I'm never going to put myself in a position of like...
I don't know. There's some adventures I've been on. I just think like... Because like my mum always says, it's like, oh, be careful. And my response genuinely every time is no. Like, I'm just like, nah, I'm all right. I'm here for the adventure. And like I picture, like, I went to Canada, for example, and I ended up getting left by my friend who I was meant to be staying with him the whole time. Things didn't work out. I was then like homeless in Canada for a month, basically, sleeping in the forest. That was my solution. I was like, I'll just sleep in the forest. I didn't realise, stupidly, I was in bear country. So, like, how I didn't get eaten by a bear, God only knows. But, like, that was, like, just step one. Then there's, like, bits where I'm making, like, active decisions where it's like, oh, I could go the safe way and go back down this path and be careful. Or I could, and, like, be sensible. But I want to take this shortcut that I don't know where it leads. And that's got me into some, like, pretty sticky situations.
But I think, I'm assuming in those situations you didn't know, for example, you didn't realise at the time it was bear country, or you didn't realise at the time that taking that shortcut would lead you to the thing.
No,
so arguably,
but, like,
you're not...
That one, like, bear country one, I'll let go. But, like, the other one, I was like, this probably isn't a good idea because there's not a set path, whereas there's a set path that I go back and it just makes it longer. And I was just like, I just can't be bothered. But in the same breath... Like, I had experience rock climbing, I had experience with, like, parkour and stuff, and the obstacles that I overcame were, like, I've got to take, like, a height drop. It's like, well, I know I can do that, and I had to climb across, like, I had to traverse across this rock, and there was, like, a death drop beneath me, and I was like, this is sketchy, and I shouldn't have done this, but I've got the skills to overcome that.
Yeah.
And that's where, like, I like the adventure side of things, and I'm like, okay, like, I can deal with this. Definitely don't copy me, guys.
Yeah.
And I think that's like a bit of a difference as well, is like how well like we were saying, like, I've had a lot of experience getting into situations like that, so it's like most people would have just like panicked, and I'm just like, okay, like, this is kind of fun. And I'm like just in the worst situation, and I come back and tell the stories and everyone's just like, are you okay? Well, like, and I'm just like, that was like the most fun I've ever had. They're like, you almost died, and I'm like, exactly. But yeah, I think a lot of that as well falls into the category of like, when you watch someone who's really good at their sport, the thing that always is the big conversation debate is when, like, Alex Honnold and Solo, people watch that film, and if you're a non-climber, you have a certain understanding of the complexity of what he's doing, as in, like, I've never, like, I couldn't even go up a wall at the gym indoors or whatever, so it's kind of unfathomable but seems just extreme and pointless. And there's a lot of that reaction, which is like, why would you do that? It makes no sense. Why doesn't he just use ropes? And then you have, like, climbers that then fall into two categories. You got, like, adventure climbers that are like, yeah, good on him. Like, he's pushing his boundaries, he's pushing his limits. And then you have other climbers that are like, yeah, like, I can really appreciate how talented this guy is, but also, why not just use ropes?
and each one has a certain level of understanding, but no one can understand his own confidence in what he's able to do. There are, of course, always going to be like a situation of that he can't control, like, you know, some high winds that were completely unexpected, or a bird flying into him, or something, you know, that could ultimately like cost him his life. But presumably, unless he is like suicidal, he isn't doing this stuff on every step thinking, oh fuck, I might fall here. Otherwise he'd never have done it.
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing that's really hard with adventure, is you don't always know where the line's going to be, but everyone else is going to view your adventure differently, and ultimately only you can really know, like, you know, how that went, how it felt. And for you, if it's fun, you know, you're obviously never getting to the point where it is truly a kind of like life and death, because it doesn't become fun when you're in that situation. You get type 2 fun.
Yeah, like this is where I probably missell it a lot, because I've got through it. Like at the top, sometimes at the time I'm like, okay, like this is scary, this is fun. There are times where it's been a lot closer than I would have liked, but in that like retrospect, I'm like, okay, that was kind of fun.
Okay.
And it's like what I love most about my adventures is the stories, and I'm like, this makes, like, as soon as I finish things now, like if I've done something that's like been totally out of my comfort zone, and like it's been like something maybe a little bit stupid, because I have done a few stupid things, as everyone has, and I've come out the other side, and the first thing I think now is like, is that going to be a cool story or what? Like that's my response, and then that's when I get like the fun from it, because there are times where it's like, when I had to traverse across that rock, that was not fun at the time. As soon as I got across safely, I was like, wow, what a story this is going to be.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's definitely like levels to it for sure. Like you can get the people that are like super overly prepared, and they've got like their itinerary for their holiday, and it's like, we've got to make these times on our hikes, and we've got all of this food packed. And then you've got the other ones which are like, I've got nothing. Like, let's see how this goes.
Yeah, I think for me, and maybe similar for you, but part of adventure is to leave that kind of like, you know, itinerary, box ticking, you know, that we live in that world, and the adventure gives you that opportunity, doesn't it, to kind of be a bit more, kind of reconnect a bit, I suppose, with your sort of ancestry, with like how we kind of were designed. Like we were all able to just survive off the land, to just roam, and obviously we had loads of other problems like disease and low death rates, but I think for me, certainly, like adventure is that opportunity to essentially just leave modern world, put it in a box and go, right, I'm just going to go and try and really like go minimalist, go and push myself, try and reconnect a little bit, get out in nature, be in the elements, all this stuff that we're kind of shielded from so much now, because we spend so much time indoors, we spend so much time behind screens. And I think that for me leads me down that, like, do you know what, I just want to see if I can go and ride my bike with just a bivvy bag. I don't even need a tent, you know. Maybe I'll take a tarp in case it rains. And sometimes I'm like, do you know what, I'm not even going to take a tarp. If it rains, what's the word? I'm just going to get a bit wet. Like, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But like we you know, but in our day-to-day life, it's an inconvenience, and it's like, it is enough of an inconvenience to like matter. It's like, you know, I don't want to ride my bike to the gym and get soaked through. So I take my coat and make sure I, you know, like, the weather's been so on off recently that I've just left my coat in my bag, because I don't want to be caught out with the rain, because it is just a bit annoying. But the adventure is the opportunity to go, do you know what, actually that shit doesn't matter. Yeah. Like, we can all survive, we can all live. We've all lived in the harder times, as in humans, not us ourselves, have lived in much harder times with gear that's way less technical, achieving far greater things than I'll ever achieve. So
this like brings me like two different avenues that I want to go. Like the one I'm really keen on now is when you're like, like people have survived with way less technical equipment, because I've got like so many people, like obviously I'm big into running at the moment, and I'm doing all these running courses, and I get so many people being like, oh, what's the best shoes for me? And I'm like, who gives a fuck? They're shoes. Just put them on and go running. And they're like, oh, what about the hill drop, or like, what's better, like Gore-Tex or what? And I'm just like, I'm lost in shoe conversations. Like, I'll go get my gait analysis done, and they'll recommend me a shoe, and I'm just like, cool, I'll get them. But like, people get so in depth, and they're like, oh, I thought running was like meant to be cheap, and I've had to buy this, and this. I'm like, you didn't have to buy all that. Like, you chose to. Like,
Yeah.
do you need all of that stuff? No. Are you kind of taken away from the fun of it? I think so. Like,
So I interestingly, over the last year, so I started properly barefoot running, no shoes, no socks, no like Vibram 5 fingers, and I haven't been able to run more than about 7 kilometers, 10 kilometers for about a year. But every time I go running, I absolutely love it, and I can only run for like 20 minutes, half an hour, but they're like, for me at the moment, much better minutes than me putting on my shoes and then going out and doing it more for distance, because I'm in my bare feet, as though I put my bare feet on. This is what's mad, isn't it? It's like they've always been there. Like, we all have perfectly functioning feet, and then we shove them in these shoes and over stress about, oh, well, I can't do this if I don't have that and whatever. And actually, anyone could run in their bare feet. It's just that no one really wants to, and I get that, it's a bit extreme, but anyone could just go out the door. Anyone that said, oh, I can't run because I can't afford a pair of trainers, it's like, well, you can. Like, you could just go and run in the park in your bare feet. You might only be able to do like 5 minutes to begin with, but you could build it up. And there's loads of people out there now who are doing ultras and just super long distances running fully barefoot.
yeah,
And I just think what an amazing, for me, it's like the way I get to connect with the ground, and the fact that like one extra section of tarmac versus grass or stony track or loads of twigs on the ground from the trees can make a massive difference to whether I'm out for 15 minutes, 20 minutes or half an hour. And it becomes so much less about trying to achieve a thing again. It comes back to this idea of adventure, and it's like, every time I walk out the door, I do not know how far I'm going to be able to go, because I've removed all of those kind of safety nets or comfort blankets, I guess probably is a better term. And you are a lot more at the mercy of like your route and what crops up. Obviously, if I run the same routes, I know what it's going to be like, and I know what I'm able to do. And the more, it's been a bit on and off for me, which is why it's been such a long time at a similar distance. But it's just something where, like, if I want to go for a run, as in I want to get out and do a good half hour because I want it as a good cardio hit, and I've got a route that I know is about 7 kilometers, and it takes me like 45 minutes, 50 minutes, and that's great. But then if I want an adventure, I can just literally go anywhere, and in my bare feet, that's heightened that like need for, I don't need loads of other things to give me that rush, because I've taken away all of the, a bit like the free soloing aspects, it's like I've got rid of the ropes, I've got rid of all that stuff, and so I can then get that hit in like 20 minutes, half hour, which is amazing, especially if you're pushed for time. Yeah.
It's like about having that base as well, though, isn't it? Like, you've built that base, I'm assuming, through like you've done running before you started barefoot running.
Yeah, of course.
And having that ability to be like, you know what, I am going to try something. Like we're saying with free soloing, it's like, he didn't just go out and just be like, I'm not going to use a rope and I'm going to climb this wall I've never seen in my life. Like, he's prepared, he's practiced that wall, he's practiced that route, he knows the ins and outs of that rock face. And it's a thing that I go back, I actually said this on, I think it was my first podcast actually, that like, discipline equals freedom. Like, you need to have that discipline and that structure, that athlete side of things, to go off and have that adventure. And it's like, you've clearly done that and built up that base, and now it's like, now I can explore things. And I don't think people have even got, like, most people don't have that base these days, and then they see these adventures, and I think that's why it seems so extreme to them, because they don't understand how much has gone into it behind the scenes.
Yeah, I think that's totally true. Yeah, and I think it's easy to forget as well, actually, while you say that. It's easy for me to forget all the things I've done, because we stopped seeing it as like an extreme thing.
Yeah.
Like, to me now, running barefoot through Bristol with everyone staring at me is like normal. And I'm also like, I'm completely non-self-conscious because I'm like, well, I just want to do this, and I'm, to me, I've built up to it. I haven't just randomly one day, having never run, going, I'm going to run, and I don't even know if I can run, and is this person judging me for like loads of different things? I'm just like, no, I'm just, I've done running, I've done this, I've done that, and I want to give this a go. And if someone stopped me, I'd be like, yeah, just, thought I'd give it a go, see what it's like. But you're right, it takes all that other stuff in the past to build that all up. It is quite easy to forget. And I think for someone who, if it was an opportunity to inspire someone to get into adventure, I think my advice would be to pick something where the bar is already very low. And what I mean by that is not something that is easy for you, but it's something that, considering you have no experience, just go for something that just pushes you out your comfort zone that little bit. And it doesn't have to be something massive. And I think that's what people miss, is like, and that's what I'm experiencing with this barefoot running. It's like, I don't need to go out and run 20 miles to feel like I've massively achieved. I can take my shoes off and I can go and run 5-6K and feel like I've massively achieved for myself. And that's ultimately kind of why we do the adventure, isn't it? We push ourselves to have those unknown obstacles, to overcome them, to feel like we're growing as a person. And I think if you're not doing adventures for that reason, there's all the other parts that come with it. Like, the kind of adrenaline hit, the rushes, the kind of highs and lows. But ultimately, I would say if you drill down into every person you've ever interviewed on this podcast, they were all doing it for themselves, for some deeper inner drive, inner desire. And that I would articulate as growth. Like, people want to improve within themselves. And so I think, someone doesn't need all the gear, because they don't need to go and do an ultra marathon. They just need to go and join the park run. And you do not need really complicated shoes to go and do a park run. And I think that's the thing, is that the inspiration, and it's heightened now with things like social media and just kind of internet generally, because again, all that information's out there. People get sucked into this whole, like, we're inspired by people who do inspiring things. And unfortunately, social media is massively exponentially pushing people to do the most incredible things, but they're just completely obscene, really, like in terms of what someone else, just your local normal person who doesn't really do a huge amount of exercise but's kind of well into the idea of doing an adventure. They don't need to go and try and swim around the UK or row across the Atlantic. These are extreme things to go and do, but they've become really normalized because so many people have done them now. And I think it's that idea that a park run can be an adventure for somebody, or just going to your local climbing wall can be an adventure for somebody. And we need to be careful that we don't kind of like belittle those things in that way, because to you and I, those are just like I'll just do a park run. I don't have to think about it, or go to the climbing wall. And for somebody else, that's like you and I doing like an ultra or whatever, And it's like, it's all about a relativity to that person.
Yeah. I think that podcasts like this one I feel like it feeds both sides, because it does normalize, like it's definitely normalized for me, like, for example, with my running, because that's the sort of vein that I've gone down recently, is like, I'm talking to people that run 100, 200 miles, like, quite regularly. And when I'm talking to people and, like, I'm like, oh, you've done an ultra, cool. Like, all of my friends have. Literally, like, every single one of them has probably done an ultra at some point. And I'm just like, that's normal for me now. And, like, that's the podcast is, like, all of these amazing things, like you're saying, have become sort of normal to me. But at the same time, I'm trying to remind people that we are just normal people as well. Like, my podcast is never like, I'm never drilling into like, oh, like, you ran 200 miles and won, like, what was your splits? Like, I don't care about any of that. I'm like, what was, like, I'll ask, like, oh, how do you prepare for it? And then I'm usually sort of like asking things of like, oh, like, what did that feel like, and what was your funniest moment? And
it's a story, like you said. It's about the story, isn't it, behind the adventure that someone's done. And what's interesting about that is, in anything you want to do in life, the more you surround yourself by people that do it, the more you're likely to do it and to succeed, because ultimately those people are shaping your perspectives and also offering you support, advice. And you're right, like, if I went and spent the next 10 years surrounded by billionaires, what do you think I would end up doing? Like, I would naturally learn how you make money quicker, how you invest money better, how you save money, all these things that they already naturally know because they've done it. Otherwise, they wouldn't be billionaires, assuming they're not, through inheritance.
Yeah.
But do you know what I mean? Like, it would work. Like, I'm not interested in money. I don't want to do that. That would be ridiculous. But I would guarantee, even if I did do that and I wasn't interested in money, I would understand so much about money because I'm just surrounded by people. That's all they talk about all day. So obviously you're going to learn loads. Whereas, for someone who wants to do adventure, to surround themselves or start getting, again, park runs, things like that. If you start doing park runs, surrounded by everyone else running park runs, then naturally you start feeling like, oh, this is a normal thing. And you change your perspective that allows you to start pushing yourself a bit further and a bit further.
Yeah.
And I think that's why people gravitate. And ultimately, we're social beings and we want to be part of a tribe. And you kind of have to pick in your life, don't you? Like, which tribes are you part of? And, my tribes are like fitness, well-being, a bit of like art. Those are the things I love and enjoy. And if I told you about all my friends, I could tell you all of them do one or two or probably all three of those things.
Yeah. This is an interesting topic then, and I got asked this question, I'm pretty sure it was on the podcast actually, where it's like the more extreme of a challenge or adventure that you're doing, the smaller your social circle becomes. So like, what then drives us to do that knowingly that we're putting ourselves like beyond that sort of social norm?
Yeah, that's a great question, isn't it? I think presumably it comes down to, again, personal growth is the main thing. So it's more important for somebody to scratch the itch than it is to just maintain a norm. But also, for me, when I used to do more kind of trips, adventures, stuff like that. And I think it was an opportunity to inspire others. And I think that is the natural progression when people do harder things and they reduce their social circle. I guess in some ways they can expand it by becoming the person that can inspire and create a community, which is something you've certainly done with your work, where you're then re-expanding your social circle by inspiring the people who may want to do those things.
That's actually a really good answer. It's something that's been like on my mind a lot recently, is like with all of this growth and everything, it's firstly like, where does it end? Like,
It doesn't.
When is enough enough? And then secondly, it's going down that sort of route of I'm trying to think how to explain it. Like, I don't know.
Well, let's just take that idea though with growth. Like, when does it end?
Yeah.
And I think that ultimately never ends, personally. And what I've experienced. How old are you?
29.
So you're 29 and 34. So I'm only 5 years older than you. I would say we're in the same kind of period probably of our life. I might be a little bit ahead of you because I'm sort of 5 years older than you. But generally, you have like seasons of life. That's what I've certainly attached for myself, and also from people I listen to, like people I find inspiring that talk about this stuff. It really resonates with me. But this idea that growth never stops only because right now these things are really important to you. When you're 75, 80, do you think these things right now you're not worrying about, but you're working towards are going to be such a thing at the forefront?
Probably not.
Yeah, I think very unlikely. And even if someone right now was like, yeah, no, I think it would be, it's like, okay. But honestly, in like give life its run, and I think it won't be, because at that stage of your life, you have a very different perspective than you do right now. And in each stage, you have different perspectives. And when you're like a child, you're like just socially learning how to be a human. When you go off to university, you're socially learning how to be independent and how to, carve your way, become the person you want to be. For me, my 20s were like loads of adventure, like exploring, because I wanted to work out, who am I? What's this about? Some of that has drifted into my 30s, but as I've hit my kind of like coming up to my mid 30s, actually my growth is now into my relationship with my wife, the idea that, you know, maybe we'll have a family in the future. It's massively shifted from adventure. Doesn't mean I don't do them anymore, but it does mean that like the emphasis I'm putting on it or what I'm looking to get out of it has shifted quite considerably, I'd say. Yeah. And so I think growth in itself will never end. Whether it's like within that realm of adventure, I think it will also, you will grow, but I think you'll grow in a different way to what you're kind of looking to pursue right now.
Yeah.
And I'm so next year I'm going off to Mongolia to do some first ascents. And I was meant to do a trip a couple of years ago to Baffin Island, which is like between Greenland and Canada. So same team, one person had swapped, but same team that went to Greenland. Very similar experience, very remote, like zero rescue, like just there is no rescue basically. Ski in, do some routes. COVID happened, I changed career. I just kind of met my partner and we were kind of definitely heading towards the road of I wanted to propose and for us to get married and all this stuff. And because COVID pushed it so far along the track, I ended up not doing that trip because I just thought, you know what, this right now is not, my stage of life is shifting a bit. And it was really hard for me to like step back and see that. And they came back from the trip. It ended up happening this year, so it took that long. So we were meant to go in 2020, and they didn't do it till this year. So it's 5 years later down the line. So I was partly very grateful that I'd made that decision because my life has ultimately changed a lot more than I thought it would have from then. But the team leader, Tom, came back to me and he was like, oh, it was so good. We're really gutted you didn't come. He was like, but I've got this other idea for another expedition. Would you be interested? And I said to him before I knew what it was, I said, Tom, listen, it can only be 3 weeks and it can't be super remote. And I was like, if they're not, though, if it falls into that, then I'm super keen. Like, I really want to keep doing adventures. But my mindset of what an adventure is has shifted a bit because I feel like I have more responsibilities now. Yeah. And so we're now going to go to Mongolia. We're going to bike pack in. We're going to do some mountaineering, so it's not even really going to be climbing because we can't carry all the climbing gear, which is fine. Makes it way more safe. There's really good rescue. I mean, really good in inverted commas. It's still, ideally no injuries. But it's a very different beast to what I was looking at doing. And so again, for me, like in terms of that idea of growth, it's like I'm growing in a different way, which is for me to learn how I can feed my adventure alongside supporting my relationships, my career, whereas when I was in my 20s, none of that really mattered because I didn't have a big career I was super like invested in. I didn't have a partner. So so those things have changed.
Yeah. I think that's where adventure athletes has come from for me, because there was the adventure side, which very much was me when I was younger, going out and doing all these like traveling and just wild adventures. And now I'm like, how can I add this athlete side in? Like, now that I've got years of training experience and I train people as a job and I've got like all this sports science knowledge, and it's like, well, how can I add that in now? And it's like with my 6 ultras in 6 days, it was like there was a lot of planning around that, but that's still an adventure.
Yeah.
It's not going off and sleeping in the forest. Like I had a bed every night. Whether it was a sofa or like an actual bed didn't matter. But like I had somewhere safe to sleep. I wasn't going to get mauled by bears while I'm sleeping. But at the same time, it's like I don't know what tomorrow's going to bring. Like I know the routes, I know what the plan is, I know where the checkpoints are. But like, how am I going to feel? Like, how am I going to deal with it? What if I get injured and all these things? And it's like, that's still an adventure.
Yeah.
But it's like you're saying, it's a different level of adventure.
Yeah. And I guess adventure ultimately just takes different paths, doesn't it? So, for some people, for myself, I'm not going to assume for you, but for myself, some people are like, I just don't really ever want to travel abroad. Like they holiday in the UK every year. And an adventure for them is to go to a holiday park in North Devon and stay in a static caravan, and go down to the beach every day. And, who am I to judge them on that adventure? Like, for them, in their scenario, in their circumstances, with their perspective, wicked. If that's an adventure, like, the main thing for me is that what they're getting from this adventure is some ability to reconnect with, what it is really to be truly, like, human.
Yeah.
And I think as long as it ticks those boxes for people, then great. But ultimately, for you and I, that's not an adventure, because we've done other things. We have other experiences. We have other expectations of what adventure holds.
Yeah.
And I think, yes, ultimately, I would say 90% of adventure should be something that requires you to be outdoors, doing some kind of physical activity that is going to also test your mental fortitude. But that doesn't have to be the be-all and end-all of an adventure. Maybe that gets shrunk down because part of your adventure for your 6 and 6 was the planning, and is this possible? Having a team, for people that sometimes are trying to break records and stuff. The adventure is like, can we all do this as a team? Is it logistically possible? That becomes the adventure, because what if this car breaks down and you don't get to hear? And, that's also a load of unknowns, and that's creating an adventure for some people.
Yeah. I think this brings me back to what I was trying to articulate earlier, where the second part of it is like, do you think it's more like embedded in certain people to have that need for adventure? Like, definitely when we were like cavemen or whatever, and people are like starting to expand and explore, like, you've got that group that are like, I want to see what's over that mountain. But a lot of people were just like, we've got a settlement here, like, we got to deal with this shit first. You guys can go, but like, we got to deal with this. And do you think that's like carried on into modern day life, or is it just the sort of nature versus nurture, I guess? Like, are some people naturally just more adventurous and more drawn to that? Or is it like they've just been brought up, they've like read the right things or seen the right things on the internet that's made them want to be more like that?
Yeah. I mean, what a great kind of thought experiment. I guess I don't know. I think that there are certainly people that have no interest in adventure. They want to stay at home. They're happy having a comfortable life. Whether or not that was a choice or it became habitual, I think that's the real question, isn't it? Is like, what came first? Is it just that actually that's all they've ever known? If you were brought up and your parents have never done anything adventurous and they don't encourage you to do anything adventurous, none of your friends do anything adventurous, are you going to be adventurous? I don't know. I think everyone reaches a point in their life where they must start to question certain things about their life. And I reckon it really comes down to his awareness in terms of what you feel inherently is like good for your soul, or whatever you want to call it, And I would argue that I think within all of us, there has to be a level of that reconnection. Like, we know science proves that just, forest bathing, forest walking, all these kind of things, like just getting fresh air first thing in the morning, they have like biological responses that we are wired to affect us. And so everyone must receive that. And I guess that's what is fed into that idea of adventure, in terms of like the nature and the pushing ourselves a little bit. And yeah, I just think some people aren't aware, I would say, that it's kind of even a thing.
Yeah. I feel like for you, like, you've grown up, like you were saying, like, with that sort of, get outside, like, why are you inside?
Yeah, I was massively forced into it, 100%.
Yeah, whereas for me, I see it a bit differently, because although, like, I wasn't brought up to be lazy by any means, like, working family, like, my mum worked on the market, and, like, I would go down the market and have to work when I was a kid and, like, carry sacks of spuds and things like that. And, like, my dad was sporty, my brother's sporty, they used to go down the park, play football, and I wasn't interested as a kid. And I was like the kid that's like, I want to stay home and play video games, and my lunch times I would generally go to the library and read, or like find something else to do, and I wasn't that adventurous as a kid. But then, like, as I was growing up, like, and people sort of expected that of me, they were like, oh, he's gonna be like a coder, and like I wanted to like code video games and things like that, and people are like, yeah, that's the sort of route we can see Will going down. And then, like, I got to like 15, and I just had this draw for like, well, at first it was like I wanted to be military because I like that discipline and that side of like you can go anywhere. But like in my head, I was like, I just want to like go to uni and like settle down, have kids when I'm older. Like that, I was very much like the normal route, office job. And then like, yeah, I got older and I was just like, oh, free running. And I just had this draw to like these really obscure things. And then I was like, oh, traveling. And now my life's like flipped on its head, and I'm an adventure athlete, and I'm just like, where the hell has this come from?
But what do you think was the switch though? Like what happened? What was the kind of like, there must have been something that pushed you to start looking into...
I don't think there was like any... This is what I'm trying to understand. Like, I feel like if it is a sort of like nature thing, I feel like I was born with that in me, but like because I've been drawn to it. Like I was like, I've always been, and I see things and I'm just drawn to it, and I don't know why and like what motivates it. But then at the same time, I'm like, well, when I was growing up, I wasn't like this. Like my dad would put me on the first branch of a tree while him and my brother climbed it, and I'd sit there hugging the trunk because I was like terrified and I didn't want to climb it, and I was like, I just want to go home.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't know where that switch happened, and I don't know why it happened, but it did. And now I'm like completely opposite to what I used to be. And there's a part of me that's like, there's always been that sort of like desire to do more. And it's just something that I feel in me. But then I'm also like, but that wasn't me. And I'm like, which one is it?
Yeah, it's tough, isn't it? I mean, I guess we also, you know, if you took it away from adventure and sport and activity, it kind of happens with other things as well, right? Like, you know, you're into one thing for a while, and again, maybe it falls into seasons of people's lives of like, you're not going to start thinking about, I don't know, like having kids when you're super young, but then you probably get to your mid-20s, late 20s, you may be thinking about it a bit, maybe you get into your 30s. I mean, for women, obviously, they have like a biological clock, so that at some point they need to have had children or they can't have children. And so I wonder if there is that ability within all of us, obviously, to change and switch. So it is a kind of like nature thing. But then also, I think one of the beautiful things about adventure and getting outdoors, being active, is, which, you know, like it's being so peddled now because of the rise in mental health issues, the rise in other health issues, you know, like obesity, things like that. But it's like, it's a positive feedback loop. Like no one goes and does some sport and doesn't feel better for it. Like it's just like, once you do start to scratch the itch, it just becomes a bug, doesn't it? You know, and you see that all the time with people catching running bugs, or, you know, like even people that, you see these people that go and just wild camp, or they'll just go out for one night. And they just, you know, I remember, especially when I was in my 20s, following some people that do the, like Alistair Humphreys, who brought in the micro adventure idea. But, you know, you just see these people, they're like working professionals who just one night decided, do you know what, I need a break. I just want to go out into the wild, into the woods, you know, in Epping Forest or something. And they do it once and then they love it, and they're like, okay, I'll do it next week or whatever. And then, you know, suddenly it just becomes a thing. That it's like, yeah, because you're getting outside, you're escaping, you're getting rid of tech for a bit. All the things we know are really good for our like health, essentially. Yeah. So I guess that's one part of that, is like, it doesn't take a lot, I don't think, for people to, once you start on that road, it's very easy to fall into it and it become part of your identity and part of who you want to be. But yeah, the switch, I think, yeah, I don't know. And I guess maybe it's just different for everyone. But ultimately, I think if I was really pressed to give an opinion, I would say it is a nature thing. I think it is within all of us that we all feel those effects. And if we can have enough space away from the things that kind of detract from that, like artificial lighting, technology, the kind of like daily, I don't want to call it the daily grind, but the kind of like, you know, got to get to work, I've got to do this, I've got to take the kids to the school. Like these things will keep us on the treadmill.
Yeah.
I think it becomes very hard to step off it. And you see, again, like there's one of the positives of social media, isn't it? Of seeing like, you know, a lady in her 40s, kids have started growing up, got a bit more free time, suddenly have some more space in their life to like probably review and assess what they actually want from life, take up running, start running marathons, and then they're like some ultra athlete. And it's wicked. Like, what an amazing, you know, thing to do, assuming that they enjoy it and they're feeling more healthy for it. But I think there is that kind of like requirement of having some space if you're not someone who already is an adventurer or has been brought up with that sense of doing those things. You need that space to ultimately get the opportunity to realize the benefits of those things you maybe already do on like microdosing, like, you know, taking a walk around the park and stuff, but not quite enough to see the like long-term benefit.
Yeah, it's definitely like an interesting thought experiment of like what's caused these changes. Like for me, like I think about it a lot because I'm like, how did I get here? Like, what has led me down this path? And like I'd never, like, I can pinpoint like, oh well, this is when I started doing this and this, but I'm like, where does that actually come from? What's made me make those decisions that have led me here? And yeah, I probably spend way too much time thinking about it personally.
Yeah, I mean, I've never really thought about it. I mean, it's
going to be in your head now.
Yeah. In a similar way, I guess it's like going back to like when I was at uni and then my mate called me up. Like that was the moment. But had I been thinking, oh, I really need to go out and do some more adventures again, up until that point, I can't remember if that was like back on my radar. Like it's not a surprise to me that I do what I do now and what I've done in my past. But yeah, I can't remember if there was that kind of like yearning for it before that or when we did that. That was definitely the trigger for me. Because after that, it was like every couple of years I went off and did something.
Yeah. Because I always think like if I introduced myself to the people that knew me when I was like 10, they would be like, where has this come from? And it's just like, well, I don't know, but this is where we are. Like it would just be so unexpected to them.
Yeah.
But like I think maybe in like 10 years time, if I introduced like 40-year-old me to me now, would I have that same reaction, or is it going to be quite predictable of like, no, I can see that. Like I don't think there's going to be as drastic a change without anything like life-changing happening to me. Touch wood, it doesn't. But like,
yeah,
you know, like I can feel like there's a lot of things that could happen. I can't predict what's going to happen, but I feel like I'm on like a path now where it's like, I kind of know that I'm going a certain way by now.
Yeah. I think we're also like, as human beings, always thinking about those sorts of things. It's very hard for us to just stay present and go, yeah, well, this is just how it is. And then, you know, when I'm 40, it'll be different. And what that looks like doesn't really matter, because we become very attached to identities, don't we? And it's like you are kind of, when you were describing you as a younger kid, you're creating an identity of like the more what's the term for, like, withdrawn, I guess, like in that sense of like wanting to code and being kind of more into that, or I would label it as like more of a geeky kind of maybe upbringing. But now you wouldn't identify as a geek, but I bet you still love playing video games or doing that stuff? No, not at all. No, so you completely dropped
TV anymore.
Yeah, so you completely dropped that entirely.
Like, I can see how that's like transformed into other things. Like I've got all my sports science books behind you.
Yeah, exactly. Like, so you're using the similar skill set.
That's like my geeky sort of stuff still there.
Yeah.
And people see it when I talk about sports. Like my clients are just like, "What? You're really into this, aren't you?" And I'm like, "Yeah." Like I'm really into fitness now. But it's not just as much as I do like being fit and like to be able to do stuff. I like knowing about it. But then I think that's the adventure athlete. Because like I love the sports science, but then I'm like, how far can I push it? How far away from the science can I get and still get like a good stimulus or whatever? Yeah. And it's just
I think
exploration within a topic.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because so for me, so I used to do camera work and I would go off around the world filming a lot of natural history, did a lot of adventure shows, and I would be away for long periods of time. And I reached a stage in my life where I was just like, do you know what? I don't know what the future is. Again, forecasting forwards, when I'm 50, I don't see myself doing this job. Like, I don't want to be away most of the year, working with people that I then never see when I'm not on a shoot. They're not friends. They're kind of colleagues. And then I spend like no time with my actual friends, my now wife and that sort of stuff. But for me, the camera work and the TV industry, that whole lifestyle I had because that was all adventure as well. It was like, go and film in Africa and there's like, you're right next to a massive elephant that could just like knock you over in like 2 seconds. And it was all wrapped up in one, like adventure, travel, cameraman. I couldn't sit down at a table and someone say, "Oh, what do you do?" And I go, "I'm cameraman," and they go, "Oh, cool." They'd be like, "No way! Like, what's the best place you've ever been to? What's the best thing you've ever filmed?" Like, people want to know about it. It became a massive part of my identity. When I decided I wanted to leave that career, it was so hard. Like, I didn't realize how much I latched onto identities, and I'm really conscious now of trying not to make my new career as a kind of like movement coach and doing all that kind of work to become an identity beyond it's my job. I love it. It's a super like passionate job that I will hopefully do, for many, many years to come. But that transition for me, because I found it so difficult, has definitely helped me to shape into more of a like, yeah, this is what I do now. It might change a bit. It's going to be fluid, because I became so transfixed on I'm going to be a cameraman. I'm going to be one of the greatest cameramen. I want to film on top shows. I want to film a BBC thing. I want to film it, And in my head, that wouldn't happen for like another 10 years. And then I was like, oh my God, I'm going to give up this career. I've spent like 12 years working my arse off to get to where I am now. And then I'm just going to like let it all go. But you've like lost that dream that you had.
Yeah.
And that's like, for me, it was just crushing. And then like rebuilding that again, you can bring this back to adventure, which is like, you have your low, which is like shit's gone wrong that you weren't expecting, that you weren't prepared for. Like not finishing a race, not completing the thing you've set out to do, or getting injured and having to pare back or whatever it is, that makes you feel really crap at the time because you feel like you failed. But then actually within that, there's so much growth because you're like, well, I haven't failed. Look at all the stuff I've achieved from just setting myself something that I didn't know if it was possible. And again, it comes back to that. If it's possible, it's not really a true adventure because you need that level of, well, for me personally, that fear of failure is such a thing that holds so many people back. And it's still a big thing for me. Like with my business, it's like, do I put this thing out? I don't know if I'm ready. I don't feel qualified enough. There is that fear of judgment, fear of failure. But yeah, being able to let go of that career and now be in a place where talking about this stuff doesn't impact me emotionally. It doesn't make me feel like, oh, I was a failure because I gave up on this career that was, could have been really good and whatever. I think there is that ability to shift. That for me was a big shift.
Yeah. I feel like I'm where you were with your videography is where I am at with adventure athletes, where it's like, this is me. And it's so easily done when your business is your passion, because it's like, I've made adventure athletes based on everything that I am really passionate about and I absolutely love. And it becomes very hard to detach yourself from the two. Like, if the business isn't doing so well, then it's like, am I a bad person? Like, why isn't it doing it well? Like, what's wrong with me? And then it's like, well, there's nothing wrong with you. Like, I always have to remind myself, like, if my business isn't doing well, say like an aspect of it, like the personal training side, that's a luxury for people. Like, in the sort of current economic state that the world's in, it's like paying someone to be there with you and walk you through a fitness plan is a massive luxury for a lot of people. And I'm like, I have to remind myself, like, oh, it's nothing against me. It's just like, people might not be able to afford it, or people might want to like do something else with that money.
But also, maybe they just don't want to do it.
Yeah.
Like maybe they don't. Maybe they just decided. Because this resonates with me massively, because I'm the same. Like sometimes I can become really, basically the success of my day-to-day working life impacts, am I happy? Am I feeling a bit down? In exactly the same way. And sometimes it's like, maybe they just don't like me. That's also fine, because what I discovered from that kind of big career shift is that what actually is kind of like your true identity is layered underneath all that, which is like are you an honest person? Do you have good integrity in terms of like how you handle situations or people? These things that ultimately make up who we are, they all still sit underneath. And so it's like, for me, that's the one I will always go to, because it's the worst one, right? It's like, if a client leaves, so maybe they just don't like me. That's like a horrible thing to think, because everyone wants to be liked and you don't like the idea that someone doesn't like you, but maybe they don't. And that's also okay, because if what you stand for is like the honesty, the integrity, the kind of like the courage to do stuff that other people don't want to do, or like to start a business, a lot of people would never even want to become like a business owner because they're too afraid, or they're just not interested in it. But like those things don't change. So then if they don't like you because of those things, you're never going to want to change those anyway. So you'd be like, okay, well then they're not for me. They're not a good fit.
Yeah.
And actually that for me really helps to like reframe it in the same way you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just hard in the moment, because it's just like, this whole business is me, and if it's not doing well, then I'm not doing well. And then I'm like, but I want to do well. And it's not like if I just had like a normal day-to-day job, like say I was stacking shelves in Tesco's, at no point would I attach that job to me, because like, I don't care. If someone came up to me and was like, these shelves are stacked absolutely horribly, I'm like, whatever. But it's not that. It's because it is so much of like my heart and soul goes into it. It's so hard to detach.
Yeah, it is. And I think it's a bit like growth, isn't it? I don't think that will ever change, because ultimately the thing it immediately attacks is like those core values of like, well, does that mean I'm not showing my integrity because they feel like I haven't given them enough value to stay with me? That's the initial response that you want to go to, which is an emotional one rather than a logical one. And then you get that moment to be like, well, no, but logically, like, I've given them as much time as my other clients who also all love me and love like how it's going and what's happening, and I've been really fair with how I've priced it. If all those things are still ticking the boxes, you haven't changed.
Yeah.
So then it's just not a good fit. But you're right, like immediately it's an emotional response, isn't it? Of like, why does everybody hate me?
Going more into your business then, because we haven't really spoke much about it, to be fair. Like, you do obviously your movement stuff. You're releasing a podcast yourself, which I'm very excited for.
Thank you.
Let's go into more detail about like what you do as a job, because we met Cardiff Running Show.
Yeah.
You recognised me.
Yeah.
Which I was like,
wow. From when you did the tyre flipping challenge.
Yeah. And that blew me away. I think that was one of the first times I'd been recognised in public.
Excellent.
And I was just like, what is going on?
Love it. That's good.
Yeah. No, it's happened like a few times since, and I still get blown away. I'm like, I'm really not famous, but like, this is making me feel like I'm famous.
Love it.
And then, like, you are interested in like injuries and movement and how to move as a human. Essentially, that's what I've picked up from it anyway. And I think that's an underrated skill, is to move like a human these days, because you go to the gym, you lift in one plane of motion. You go through life, you move through one plane of motion generally. And I always took it for granted, because when I started coaching people, I was like, how comes the people that I'm coaching are always complaining of the same things, like bad backs, bad knees and things like this? And how comes I'm not suffering with that? And it was just, I've done years of sport, and I was still doing sport like parkour or free running. You're twisting, you're moving, you're climbing, like rock climbing then. Like, it's the same thing. You're putting yourself in positions that you don't get to do in day-to-day life. and I've always done sports like that. This is probably the period of my life at the moment where I'm not doing anything like that, and I'm like craving getting back to it because I'm like, I know I need to rotate more. But like that's why I really gravitated towards what you were doing, because I was like, oh, this is awesome. So yeah, let's talk about that.
Yeah, I mean you're like spot on. Basically, that's the everything in a nutshell. I mean, for me, it stemmed from I did an ultra marathon. It was the first time I'd ever done one, and I got a really bad knee kind of niggle, just really frustratingly. So with all my adventures, like we covered, I'm not the biggest prepper. Like I'd never train for an adventure. I would train on my adventures because they were always long distance endurance things. So I'd done a lot of long distance bike packing, a couple of like long walking things. And then the climbing expeditions are like, yeah, you know, it sounds like, oh my God, he's doing first ascents. It's like out of a 5-week trip, we did about 8 days of climbing. So most of it is just walking up and down, you know, navigating. And it's like you can get fit while you're doing it, even if you haven't been doing a lot of walking or running. At the time when I was filming, I just, you know, I didn't have time to train because you're just working 12-hour days, 6 days a week. And like routine was just a non-existent thing in my life. So I would just blag it, and I'm naturally very flexible. And so that means I'm naturally more likely to pick up injuries, and we can go into why that would be. But when I did the ultra, I was like, right, I am doing a training plan. I'm going to like really do this properly because I know like how easy it would be to get an injury having not really done load. You know, I would do the occasional like 10k, but just off the back of like someone being like, oh, I'm going to go for a run. And I was like, yeah, fine. I naturally have a natural fitness and ability, and you've probably seen this loads where people just, and then you just go out and do too much, and then it's, yeah, too late. So this was all before I did this as a job. And yeah, I picked up this knee niggle really frustratingly about 3 weeks before, maybe 4 weeks before the event. And it didn't go away, but it wasn't terrible. And, you know, it was like, okay, it was fine. I'll just see how it goes on the day, the classic, you know. Oh, well, I'll just stop if it gets too bad. And then it
Never
came
happens.
on. Yeah, it never happens, exactly. And also as a coach, you're like, well, just remember on race day, you know, you don't have to finish and it's all okay. And in the back of your head, you're like, but in reality, you're just going to push through anyway.
And I think that partly links to like, it's your business. So it's like, what are people going to think? They're like, oh, he can't even finish an ultra. How's he going to coach me for that? And
yeah, that's very true. There is that level of, feeling like you need to be the person representing the thing that you're prescribing. But yeah, so it just came on about 10 miles in, got progressively worse and worse, and I was basically had to walk the last 5 or 6 miles, and it just was excruciating. The thing I was most upset about was it was basically April when we did it, and I was like, well, this is the summer gone, like no other sport. Like I love surfing, climbing, and I was like, that's it. And like, what a stupid, like for one day, just to prove to myself I could go a certain distance to then ruin 4 months of the best time of the year. That was going through my head the whole race, and I was just like beating myself up, really, like just constantly being like, this is stupid, you should stop, this is stupid, you should stop. But that thing that you have, that little seed of being like, yeah, but it might be all right, you know, whatever, just let's keep going. And I am a stubborn person, and so again, it falls into that, like the more of this stuff you've done, the more you kind of know your traits and things. And I said, look, we're gonna get to, I did it with my wife, great way to build good relationships, by the way, doing ultras together. It was brilliant. I was like, we'll get to this point, and if it's really bad, I'm going to pull out. If not, and we go past, I'm going to try and go to the end, just so we had a final decision of like what's going to happen. Because we were in that thing where it's like we did it together like the whole way around, so she kind of could have run off, and but she just decided she'd stay with me, which is very nice. That's why we're still together. Yeah, and so I finished it. It was really painful. Came home. And then over the next like 5 or 6 days, I was like, it's not actually as bad as I literally thought I wouldn't be able to walk the next day. And then it was not too bad the following day. And I was like, this is crazy, because whenever something like that's happened, it would really stick around. Within about 2 weeks, it had gone. But then basically what happened was I couldn't do more than a like 5k walk or run or anything or a bit of sport without it flaring. And that went on for about 6 months a year. And then over that period of time, I decided I was going to retrain, like leave TV, and I couldn't decide what I was going to do. But I spent all of that time basically, a bit like you were saying about the sports textbooks. I was just like, went straight in hard on rehab, why you get these recurring injuries, how to prevent them, how to fix them, watching hours and hours of, physio stuff on YouTube. I mean, the amount you can learn now for free is insane. And just went in like head first and just uncovered all this stuff. And I was like, had that light bulb moment where I was like, why is no one talking about this? Like, it's crazy to me that like we put so much emphasis on, all these like the big lifts or just the general gym stuff, if at all, and nothing on the kind of strength, flexibility, mobility work, like the ability to move, which is a combination, and the impacts that has, like the amazing impacts that has on performance, on speed, on power, and on injury prevention. And so, yeah, basically went through, got my knee back to being stronger than before the ultra, and then that kind of kickstarted that idea. And I was like, this is what I want to do, because for me, it was kind of life-changing in the sense that I have always had, and potentially always will have, injuries because I'm naturally flexible, and so I'm able to, without thinking, take my joints to their limits, and then it's very easy to obviously overstretch tendons, ligaments, or muscle. And so for me, it's the perfect type of training to do kind of mobility and natural movement stuff, because it is so impacting on your joints. So it allows me to really strengthen my joints and then reduces my risk of injury. So I'm not hypermobile or anything like that, but this would be something, if you had hypermobility, this would be the number one thing you should be looking at doing. And then in terms of other people, it just comes down to your situation. So like you said, like most people live in a very single plane where we're always just going forwards and backwards. We never go side to side. And if we do go side to side, we turn our feet, twist our hips, and then we walk forwards and backwards again. We very rarely move in like a diagonal movement. And the only time, to be honest, that we do that is when we play sport. Like if we're running around a tennis court or a football pitch, in a squash court, that sort of stuff. You can get a little bit from running, but to be honest, unless you're trail running, it's very minimal. It's still very forward and back. And so the number one thing people do when they're like, I want to get a bit fitter, a bit better at cardio, what do? They'll either go on a rower at a gym, or they'll go on the treadmill, or they'll run. And all of those are still very forward and back movements. Rowing arguably has a little bit more hip work because you're having to get into that kind of compressed position. But yeah, they're not the best for what modern life and living is degrading from us, which is our kind of hip strength and our what's called contralateral strength, which is this crossbody, the twisting, the rotation, because we just don't do it anymore. We don't need to. And I think it's reached a stage where realistically, if we don't have so many other problems in the world, you would be at a stage now where we need to be encouraging schools. Well, there's two ways we do it. One is we get rid of chairs. We get rid of this idea of this stupid, like, kind of industrialized way of teaching children, which is basically all of these issues have started from pretty much the Industrial Revolution, where we just had to pack people into spaces. What's the easiest way to do that? Get them to sit on chairs. How do we, get kids to learn maths so they can go and work in a factory or whatever it was at the time, just sit them down, because then they can't play, they can't wriggle, they can't get distracted. All the this is ultimately where this stuff did really come from. It was a very utilitarian approach to a current problem, which is fine, but we're still doing it now, and it's so outdated. And there's loads of science on like child development that shows that being asked to sit in a chair all day is not good for your development. But that's basically where it all stems from. So as we grow up, we just are losing so much strength in the areas that create those kind of abilities to move in a more natural way, because we're sat for such long periods of time, or we're stood, or we're just moving in that front to back plane.
Yeah.
So one would be throw out the chairs, but the other would just be to actually change again the textbook on PE at school, or even post school, because that's kind of where we all start to learn the idea of fitness, of like going to the gym or running around and stuff like that. It just needs to start incorporating some of these more what are currently obscure-ish exercises, because they're not a natural squat or a deadlift or a bench press, or like even to an extent like pull-ups and rows, these kind of like foundational exercises that we would all give people. They're just not in the mainstream at the moment, and they have just such unbelievable benefits.
So what sort of exercises are we talking then? What's like some examples of the sort of moves that you would coach someone through?
Yeah, so a lot of stuff. So obviously it depends on what. For me, with my clients, most of them would have an area of pain.
Yeah.
So typically, there's more. It more comes down to, rather than specific exercise, like specific set of kind of rules around how we deal with pain and injury.
Okay.
But in terms of exercise, what you're looking to do is leave the frontal plane of going forwards and back and try and go into more of a lateral plane of going side to side. So the exercises would involve bending and twisting and rotation, or if it was for your upper, or it would involve essentially getting your legs to split apart. So to go for anyone that like kind of has a concept of gymnastics, to do middle splits, to go out sideways is the most important one, or to then start internally or externally rotating through their legs. So for anyone that does yoga, things like pigeon pose is really good as a stretch, but I then turn those into strength exercises, because we have very weak hips and we have very weak lower backs, very weak traps like upper back just below the shoulders. Those are the three main areas that most people are massively lacking in what if you looked at kind of like a kind of modern hunter-gatherer now, they would still have a lot of strength in those areas because of the natural ways they move.
Yeah. So just to give like context to the listeners then, so they can sort of apply some of the ideas a bit more. Like, I'm cautious of like pigeonholing them, because obviously everyone is different. Like, even people with the same symptoms have got different causes.
Sure.
But like, for example, if someone came to you with lower back pain, what would be like some examples that you would give them to be like, oh, like this is what we need to look into?
So the easiest principle to work from is usually it's a joint above or below. So if you've got knee pain, it's usually your ankle or your hip. That is actually the problem. Lower backs are a bit different, because the vertebra of the back, every one is a joint, and so it makes it a little bit more complicated. But generally speaking, you would do the exact same approach. So you would look at the hips and you would look at the upper back, and that all supports your lower back. Ultimately, with most pains, unless you've got a ligament or tendon issue, if it's muscular, it comes down to weakness. So pretty much all pain derives from this idea that if your brain and your central nervous system is not confident that those muscles are capable of doing the thing you're asking it to do, then they want to protect it. And the way that they're going to protect that is to tighten up all your muscle. Because if you think about, if you were to be attacked by something, the first thing you would do is try and get into like a ball, or to protect your limbs, you're going to pull yourself in so that they can't be kind of ripped apart, because we know that that's what causes, the strain and the issues of actual injury. So what happens is, to begin with, we have either a singular event of, I've actually gone over on my ankle and that's twisted something. So then your body needs to protect it. So that's a good protection mechanism. So it stiffens everything up, so you can't move it, you can't use it to protect the joint so it can heal. Problem is then once it's healed, it's used to staying in that state. And unless you're forced into, which you would have been as a hunter-gatherer, because you've still got to go and collect berries and hunt and do all the other stuff, unless you're forced into movement, we don't move enough for that stuff to start to move more naturally again. So the whole area just stays stiffened. Or the other is just that the weakness comes on from inactivity, and then it stiffens up because the brain and the body want to start to protect that area because it's not confident in you using it for certain things. So with lower backs, it's like we sit down all day, our hips are getting weak, and then the back is stiffening up and tightening up because your body's trying to protect it, because you're using it more than your hips, because your hips are switching off because we're in nice, comfy, cushioned chairs. And so your lower back has to do all the support for your trunk rather than your glutes and your hips. Or that's one of like you said, there's lots of different reasons that this stuff happens, but that's a kind of one I think most people can visualize and kind of go, oh yeah, that does kind of make sense.
Yeah.
So the exercises you'd then be giving, so in the example of back pain, would be hip strengthening and upper back strengthening. I do this amazing exercise. This would be one I would give to anyone that has almost any kind of like back or hip issues, even knee issues, is I call them pigeon lifts. What's great about this is that like they don't really have a kind of standardized term. So lots of people call these things different things. Some of them I'm like, sometimes I like to describe the exercise rather than give a really technical term for the exercise. So I call these pigeon lifts, and you would use a weight bench, or you can use a couch, whatever you want, really, just to raise you up. And you go into that pigeon pose. So that would be where basically your front leg is at a right angle on top of the bench, and then your other leg is directly behind you. And then you would be ducking down like a pigeon, kind of like tapping the corn in effect. So if anyone's done yoga and knows what pigeon pose is, it's kind of an extreme version of that. But the movement of you moving your body then creates the strength around your hips, because your hips have to pull your body back up. What's great about that one is that it really targets your piriformis that comes through your hips and up and joins into your lower back. So it's like a 2-for-1 really. Yeah. But yeah, I would say there's obviously like a load of different exercises, but what it actually comes down to for anyone that's in pain, and if people wanted like actionable steps right now, is that your default mechanism, that unless you know about this stuff, is to not move if you're in pain, because we think pain's bad. But pain isn't bad or good, it's just a signal. So if you've broken your ankle and you're feeling pain, obviously don't walk on your ankle, you need it to heal. But if the doctor said, oh, that's 3 months and then you're fully healed, if in 6 months' time you're still feeling pain in that ankle, it's got nothing to do with the healing process or, you know, the bone reforming. If they've given you the all clear, obviously, that pain has become habitual. And the only way you can deal with those signals are to start using them as a positive reinforcement message. So the problem is people go, oh, it's painful, I shouldn't use it. But actually, it's just telling you that that thing now needs to start being used. It's obviously hard to know for yourself unless you have got a lot of experience. But generally, I just go off the fact that we know scientifically, you know, tendons and ligaments take X amount of time to heal. Bones take X amount of time to heal. So if you've seen your kind of like doctor, or you've been to physiotherapy and they've given you the all clear, then what it comes down to is actually you're kind of retraining your nervous system into trusting that you can use those joints again. Yeah. And the way to do that is to build so much strength that your brain is like, oh yeah, we got this. That's fine.
Yeah.
That's kind of, yeah, in a nutshell.
I know, it's a good approach. It's always hard dealing with people in pain because everyone's perception of pain's different as well. So me just being like, oh, well, you want to get to like when I give people rehab exercises, they're coming back from an injury and I'm like, right, these are the things I would recommend. You want to get to a level of pain because like you're saying, like that, you're using it as a positive signal of like, right, I'm working this thing, but you don't want to push it too much that it makes it worse. So I'm like, oh, you want to be at like a 3 or 4.
Yeah. And
like you get to that point and then some people's 3 or 4 might be like my like 1 or 2, and it's like, well, you're not pushing that enough to stimulate any positive response. But then someone else's 3 or 4 might be like my 9.
Yeah.
And then it's like, well, you're definitely pushing that too far.
Yeah.
So it's like, how do you deal with that? Like, how can people know what's positive pain versus negative pain?
Yeah, so I use this kind of technique for myself when I'm with my clients, that I obviously tell them about, but I think it's hard. One thing to say is I think it's hard sometimes for an individual to be able to assess it for themselves when they're experiencing it in some ways, because what we're talking about is more of a subjective change. And so it just takes time and encouragement and the confidence, I think, which is why if I get injured, I like to have sports massage, go see a physiotherapist, because it's nice for me to have the confidence of someone saying, no, you're good. What you're doing, what you think is the right thing, that is the right thing, because it's reinforcing, what I'm subjectively feeling.
Yeah.
But basically, I use this kind of approach for what I would call recalibration. So what you're describing, I call the pain scale. So you basically scale your pain from 0 of absolutely nothing to 10, which is agony, thinking your bone's going to break or something. And you're spot on. So really, we should be at about a 3 or 4. If we don't give enough stimulus, then there's no growth in the muscle. It doesn't get any stronger. So you're just going round and round in circles. And that's one issue people have when they come out of physio. So physiotherapy is amazing for your initial treatment, and they'll get you to a pain-free level. But that pain-free level typically is with no extra exercise involved, because you've stopped all your exercise while it's improving.
Yeah.
Then people start to exercise again, and then the pain comes back on, and people get stuck in this pain loop where it's like, they then get the pain, they go back to the physio, they do the exercises again, it goes away, but then they up their sport again, comes back, because they're not strengthening it way beyond what those physio exercises are. Because naturally, when you go into a physiotherapy room, or if you see a doctor or somebody else, they can't be there with you doing these exercises. They need to be simple. They need to be things you can probably do from home that don't involve weights. So they can only get you so far. I mean, a lot of physios are amazing, and they'll give out like YouTube links and stuff and say, once, now go off and do these things. And then the other problem is then people don't do it because they don't understand the importance of that ability to stop it coming back in the future. But using that pain scale basically allows you to make sure you're always staying in a safe range. So yeah, I always describe it as there's a difference between discomfort and pain. So you need to get to an uncomfortable level, but it should never feel painful. And ultimately, we all know for our own bodies what is painful and what isn't. And so that's always a really good starter, because we know the difference between, when you're just like sat there and suddenly you get like a spasm and you're like, oh, that's weird. But then it kind of like goes to a hot fuzzy feeling and disappears. You're like, clearly that was just an uncomfortable bit of discomfort that just melted away. Versus, like breaking something or whatever. Like we know that difference, right? Yeah. We react differently to it. So that's a good starting point. And then basically what I do is, as you do all the exercises, you make sure you never rise above your 3 or 4. If you start to trickle into 5, 6 maybe, what we do is just assess, how do you feel about 6 hours post-exercise? How do you feel 12 hours post-exercise? How do you feel 24 hours post-exercise? And then you treat it a little bit like DOMS. So if you're experiencing it immediately after or within the first 3 hours, you've definitely done too much, because you shouldn't be back in pain. In an ideal world, it never gets worse, it only ever gets better. But sometimes it's a bit of a roller coaster, so it can get a little bit worse. If it gets a little bit worse and you're about 6 hours out, we've still done too much. Yeah. If it gets a little bit worse and you're 12 hours out, we're kind of still too much, but it's not going to be the end of the world. If you get about 24 hours out and then it kind of throughout that day is disappearing, I would say that's the sweet spot. Because you need enough, because what happens when you strengthen is obviously all the tissue tightens up. That's where we get DOMS, that delayed onset muscle soreness. And that's going to trigger some more of the pain, because the stiffness we know has created the pain in the first place. So it's kind of normal to feel a little bit painful for a very short period of time, and then it eases off, and then we'll go again. But you do then obviously need to make sure you've got enough recovery. And that's how I use it to calibrate people's compass. Yeah. Because sometimes you're right. Like I've got one client who's this amazing lady who's 59 and has come back to exercise. So she's not in any pain. But I get to do exercises and she just looks like she's walking around the park. And I'll go, how hard was that? She was like, that was like a 9 out of 10. And I'm like, you visibly look like you could do loads more reps. So I did a test with her where I go, do 6 reps. She does 6, and then I say, how many more reps do you think you can do? She'll be like, I don't know, I'd probably do another 6. And I'm like, she'll do like 20. She just doesn't even look. She'll literally get to that 12th rep and she's like shaking and struggling, and like she knows she is so well dialed in, but she doesn't visibly look like she's struggling at all. And so it can be really hard to gauge, right? Like how much you should push somebody. So that system works very well because it gives time to kind of work it out. And the most important thing with all of this, and with recovery and rehab, if you are in a particular amount of pain, or if you've been in chronic pain for a long period of time, is that people don't like to hear this, but it's slow progress. And 1 or 2 weeks recalibrating and just working out how to hit it spot on is nothing in the grand scheme of your full recovery. But if you go into that first or second session and you push it too hard and you make it even worse, you just push yourself back like maybe a month. So you could like lose 2 weeks right now to get a really good calibration and go, yes, I've hit the sweet spot. This feels really good. It's like I can feel I'm getting stronger, but also it's not any more painful afterwards. That's kind of where we want to be. To just spend 2 weeks dialing that in versus like setting yourself back a month or two just because you just went in all full bore, and by the end of the session you're like, oh, I've done too much. And that comes with experience. And obviously, that's where, for me, I have built up a lot of experience doing this, because that's pretty much all my clients have come to me at some point starting off with some pain. So I can very quickly work out, okay, we need to do a bit more, we need to do a bit less, and just like get it dialed pretty quick for people.
Yeah. I'm really glad you said that, because like the way that you answered that and tracking it over time, because like you were saying a minute ago, when you go to see people about your pain, they're reaffirming what you believe. That's how I treat it. So I tell everyone that comes to me with an injury, get a notebook and log down exactly what you did, what weights, everything, and then have a section for, this is how I feel that night, this is how I feel tomorrow morning, that's how I feel tomorrow night. And you just do that constantly, and it's like you track how you're feeling, like you're saying, 24 hours later, you know if you've gone too far, if you haven't done enough.
Yeah.
Like if you're absolutely fine the next day, probably haven't done enough. If you're like in like mild discomfort but still at like that 3 or 4 range, like you've probably hit it right. If you're like at a 5 or a 6 the next day, definitely too far.
Yeah, I think if people wanted a really, like, I know, if someone's listening to this and they are in pain, and I really encourage them to look into strength exercises, because I personally believe that is the number one way to get out of pain 100%. The quickest. I would say the easiest thing, just to super simplify it, but bear in mind there is a bit more nuance to it, is essentially if you train between the morning up until about the afternoon of the first day, and within 24 hours you wake up in the morning and it's worse than it was the day before, you've done too much.
Yeah.
That's basically the simplest way to think about it, because it shouldn't ever be getting worse. It should only be getting better. But you might just feel that little flare, like when you go to bed maybe, and then I would say arguably maybe just still pare back a touch, but when you wake up it's all gone. Wicked, because you've just done a load of recovery while you're asleep. And then usually when we wake up, we're the stiffest we can be because we haven't been moving. So it's a really good indicator, basically. If you wake up the following day, obviously if you've trained like late and then you go straight to bed, it's a bit harder to, you're probably looking at the following evening. So about 24 hours.
Yeah.
But I think that is the simplest way for me, is like, if you do a workout in the morning and you wake up the following morning and it's worse, you've done too much.
Yeah.
It's that simple.
I've been, fortunately or unfortunately, through the recovery process so many times from years of sports that aren't kind to the body, like free running, parkour, things like that, and I've had some pretty serious injuries. And people always, whenever I get injured, people worry about me because they see me training, and when I come back quicker than people expect because they've been through an injury journey or know someone that has, and they're like, well, they weren't training this well this quickly. Like, it really makes people worry because they're like, oh, you're gonna hurt yourself. And I'm like, I've done this so much, I know exactly what I am doing. And then when I am back performing, like using this as an example, my 6 and 6, came off the back of that. I had torn a ligament in the back of my knee. I was on crutches for a month. A week after I came off crutches, I ran an ultra marathon and came top 10.
Okay.
And everyone was like, at the start line, like, should you be doing this well? And then everyone at the finish was like, how the hell did you do that? And it's, for me, it's like, well, I've been very specific with my rehab. Like, I've done my rehab every single day. I know what exercises to do. I know what the injury is. I know how far I can and can't push it. And then it's just like, yes, there's still, like we're saying, there's still discomfort. And when people see me running, they're like, doesn't it hurt? I'm like, yes, it hurts, but it's not getting worse, so it's fine.
Yeah.
And they, like, people don't understand that. They're like, but there's pain. And I'm like, yeah, there is. Like, it's like I could feel like that sharpness in the back of my knee, and I knew, like, if it got really bad, then I would just be like, this isn't worth it. But it didn't get any worse. It just sucked for, like, and I was like, it's staying the same, and it's gonna stay the same whether I'm running or not. So, like, if I'm running and it's staying the same, then I might as well run.
Yeah, I think what's really interesting about that is, so I'm similar. Like, I've had a lot of niggles, pains. I had, like, back pain really bad for about 10 plus years. And you sort of, like, before I knew exactly what to do, I would try things, it would go away a bit, it would come back. But what that did teach me, which was really helpful tool, is like, is this niggly pain or is this like damaging pain?
Yeah.
And that's exactly what you're describing. And what I always tell clients who, because it's never a linear journey, right? It's like a stock graph. So, like, some days it's feeling wicked, some days you wake up and you're like, why the heck, like, I didn't do anything yesterday, it's got worse. Like, your body is not linear. Like, nothing in, like, biological terms just happens as we want it to. And so one thing I always say to clients is, like, you just have to understand that every time you re-injure or it feels worse, you're just gathering more and more data. And the more data you gather, the more you understand your own body better. And at first, it can be a really daunting thing for somebody who's stuck in an injury that keeps repeating, or they start this strength work and it's not getting better as quickly as they think it should. But ultimately, what you're doing along that journey, if you can remove the frustration and the emotion from it, is just dialing in more and more. Like, what does this mean? Is this good? Is this bad? Is this like long term? Is this short term? And you can, for people that start up running, I mean, you're dealing with that every run, right? It's like, oh, I've got a weird little niggle in my knee. Oh, it's moved to my calf. Oh, it's, like later it's like, oh, it's in my hip. Like, some of those, are just things, they come and go, they come and go, they come and go. Some of them stay and you're like, okay, this is building. Like, this is not so good, but is it built to a point where by tomorrow, with some rest and recovery, has it gone?
Yeah.
Because that's essentially all you're balancing is, like, load, frequency and intensity. And that's what your body's giving you feedback on. And that's where I say, like, pain is not good or bad. And that's the problem. Like, people go asking you, are you not in pain? And you go, well, yeah, I am. Their immediate response is like, well, that's a bad thing. Stop. And it's like, no, it's just feedback. It's just your body telling you, listen, this is happening. We're at this stage right now. And the more you can understand where you are on that pain scale and where you can push that pain scale for different environments, it becomes really liberating and freeing, actually, because it gives you a lot more control. Whereas if you're somebody who is like I was, and sometimes still am, a bit of a worrier, so it's like, I don't want to be injured, especially for, like, work and stuff like that, it gives me a lot more control. And so suddenly I'm actually a lot more able to do things, because if I can put the emotional bit aside, is I can actually dial in and go, no, this is all right, like, I can push it today. Whereas before you maybe wouldn't, or you'd just constantly be in fear of something happening.
And I think it takes a lot of awareness of your own body, which, again, same with when you haven't moved like a human for a while, like we were saying earlier, you lose that awareness. And like we were saying earlier, like, we are so sheltered. We live very sheltered lives. Like, we live in, like, everything's controlled for us, like to the point where the temperature is controlled for us. That's something that's never happened in human history. You couldn't control the temperature. The closest you could do was start a fire and be like, this will warm me up a bit if I'm standing around this area. And now everything's just so controlled that it's like we lose touch of, oh, like this is what it feels to be injured. This is what it feels like to move. This is what it feels like to actually ache versus like actually be in pain and all these other things. And I think I'm lucky that I've done all the things I have because I've built that awareness over years, and I sort of take it for granted that not everyone has, like especially as a coach. Like I'm like, what do you mean you can't differentiate like discomfort from pain?
Yeah.
Like to them that's the same thing.
Yeah.
But to me, I'm like, they're very different things.
And also what's happening there is you're creating a control over your stress response as well. So a really common thing I see with clients is they ask them to do a movement and they're in pain. And so understandably, they're like, Neil, I don't think I can do this. It's going to hurt too much. And I'm like, how do you know? Have you tried it? Like, you've just decided, your brain has already restricted you from going into this position to protect you to something you maybe don't need protecting from. And that's what, essentially that's the job I do, is like to break that down for people, especially people who are in chronic pain, because it's so deep seated in their brain. And so they go into the position and they'll, for some people, and I've had this so many times, where they go into the position and they're like, whoa, and they'll come out of it. And I'll go, just 10 seconds, I'll go back into that position again. The second time round, be absolutely fine. Because the brain has had time to process it in that moment where it's still trying to protect you and it's sending you all that pain. And actually, you probably haven't even felt pain. You just are like so tense and tight and so stressed about this idea that you're going to create the pain again or make it worse, that you just create these sensations. And then the second time, it's had enough time to process and go, actually, that wasn't that bad.
Yeah.
And then they'll just go into these positions with no pain at all, even though, and I'm not saying that position would have given them pain anyway, but it's just that assumption. Before they've even tried it, they're like, no, I can't do that. It's like, you have no idea. Like, you're really limiting. It becomes a limiting belief of what is possible for you to do or not do. And that's what stops you moving, and it tightens it up even more, makes it more stiff, keeps the pain on for longer. And that's how you end up in that kind of like constant pain cycle. And then other things, like you start moving around a bit, loosens up a bit, pain goes away because it's warmed up. Then you stop and then it stiffens up again. And then every time you do a movement, that is ultimately what you need to do. And so what I do with all these exercises is, one of my clients gave us such a good term. She was like, Neil, you make the easiest things possible impossible. Like, that is essentially what we're trying to do, is like make something that looks so easy so incredibly difficult. Because essentially what we lose from traditional gym training is what we're trying to do it the other way around. We're trying to do a really easy movement, which should be easy for everyone, a squat, a deadlift. These are like the absolute basis of our movement patterns. And then we make them really fucking hard. But actually, what we're lacking isn't our ability. Yeah, how often do we need to be able to squat like double our body weight? Like, we don't. It's ridiculous. But like, I'm not dissing it as an exercise. I think it's an awesome exercise. But you can get so much of that benefit from actually just doing the really simple stuff that people find really difficult. Because those are the things we avoid because they're difficult. And so, so a lot of these positions are like just things that you barely need any weight anyway, because you just put your body into the position that makes it really hard already, and then you're only adding just small increments to make it harder.
Yeah.
Because essentially that so beyond like your immediate pain, you're gonna go into the prevention side of it once you're out of pain. And the prevention is essentially going to your end range of motion, going into the most flexible position you possibly can with that joint or that area of your body. And then from there, where it's weakest, so the belly of the muscle, the middle bit, that's where we're really strong. And that's why you'll see people who are like maybe quite muscular are quite stiff, because they've trained in their mid-range loads, but their end ranges, which are naturally weaker anyway, because that's where they taper off and connect into our joints, those are so weak that they can't use it. They can't use that bit of muscle to give them that flexibility. So what I do is stretch it right out, go right into those weakest parts, and then strengthen the weakest parts first. So it's reverse engineering, essentially, all those exercises. So it's like, cool, if you can squat loads, can you, which is like a nice linear pattern for your hips, can you now put your hips into the non-nice patterns, which are like middle splits or super external internal rotation, which most people can't naturally do because we just don't use it anymore. And then can we build the strength from there? And actually, arguably, I think that's way more beneficial for most people, because naturally we can already still squat, deadlift. Most people can still squat, even if you raise their heels up. Like, that's not a difficult movement for people to do, so we have to make it really hard. And it's like, well, there's loads of really hard stuff that we can't do, so why are we spending so much time? I just think it's overemphasized. I'm not someone who's like, yeah, don't need to squat. Yeah, no, it's great. Do what you want to do. But I do think we put too much emphasis on these really simple, obvious movement patterns and none on the really difficult ones.
Yeah.
And then, so what excites me about that is animal movement. So this idea, or primal movement, if anyone's heard of it, it comes under a few different names, but essentially these are full body movement patterns that push you through your entire range. So you might start off mid-range, but you're going to at some point end up in an end range on all your joints across the whole body. And it's such a humbling experience for people because it looks so easy. And like you were saying, so you come from a gymnastics background, so you naturally would have done quite a few of these movements probably, because you are looking to train end range, so you can do these more complex movements. But yeah, it's like, it's such an easy way to just make people understand the importance of all of that kind of movement, because it just looks so easy. And you could be someone who can do like double your body weight in squats, but you can barely crawl across the floor. And that to me is mad, you know?
Yeah, that's where I like the sort of base that I built from like parkour and free running, because it was like, you're running, you're like diving at things, you're twisting, you're rotating, somersaults, and like you put yourself, and like it's not like gymnastics where that's still like forward and back with some rotation. It's like you're reacting to the environment as well. So it's like you've got all these walls that are like scattered in different places, different angles, and you're like bouncing off things. And it's like, I didn't appreciate at the time the base that built for me now. And now I'm looking back, I'm like, I'm so glad I did that, because now when I do move on to like double body weight squats and things like that, that I'm like, this is fine, because I know that I can also do all this other stuff. And it's not like, well, I can do that, but I can't like touch my toes. Yeah. It's like, well, I can touch my toes. Like, I don't feel like I'm stuck in this movement pattern. And then like the rest of my training reflects that. Like I do a lot of plyometrics and stuff. And it's like, how many people in a commercial gym do you see doing plyometrics? Yeah. Like,
and you can guarantee the only people doing plyometrics are athletes. Like they'll be doing a sport of some description. Like who is like, and I understand that, you know, people have a discipline, that's their sport is weightlifting or whatever. But I think the issue with that in like a more commercial gym setting is that if you were to do any other sport and you really get into it, at some point along that journey, someone says, listen, you should probably do some strength training to go alongside that, because you're going to get to a stage where it's going to be detrimental on your body. You know, if you just start running and then you want to start doing really long distances, hopefully along that path, someone has said, listen, if you're feeling a bit niggly and stuff, you really need to start strength training. Yeah. Problem with like those people that are doing the kind of pretty basic movement patterns in the gym lifting, and they won't do things like plyometrics or any of the mobility stuff, is because there isn't really that culture within that lifting community. It's getting better, I think. And I think, again, that's one of the positive impacts of things like social media, because there's some amazing lifters that have brilliant mobility, like gymnastics level, that are super inspiring, actually. But for most people, the culture of lifting is, well, how much do you lift? That's the question. You know, it's like being part of a running community, and you go, I went for a run, and people just go, well, how far did you go? It's like, well, is it about how far I went, or is it about the fact that I just like running and whatever, And but I think just with the lifting community, it's like the emphasis is on how much can you lift, and they don't want to waste time doing all this other stuff until they get injured, and then they maybe see the light, or they do enough to start lifting again.
Yeah, I think powerlifting, especially like you're saying, like they'll get to a point, and the only reason why they'll get into that stuff is because they get injured, but then it takes away from what they're doing, and they're like, I've got injured, so I'm going to do this, and that's going to be my new thing, and I won't get back into that to the same level. But what I think a sport that does it amazingly well is Olympic lifting, because you look at them and they are like outlifting powerlifters, not like at the elite level, because there's like that level of specificity, but you look at like an average Olympic lifter versus like an average powerlifter, and the Olympic lifter in my eyes is always going to be squatting more than them, probably going to be deadlifting more than them, won't be benching more than them, but like that's the trade-off in their sport. But then you look at like the training they do, and it's like they will do plyometrics, they will do mobility, they will do like back extensions, and although they don't have like this super extensive program of like these are our main lifts and then we've got all these other accessories, they'll have very specific accessories where it's like, this makes me move better, and they need that mobility in their shoulders, in their hips, everything, because of the extreme positions they're putting themselves in under load. And it's like, I always look at Olympic lifters and how they train, and I'm like, especially like you look at like the Chinese Olympic lifters, and I just watch them training on like Instagram and stuff, and I'm like, they've just got it right. Like they're doing sprints, they're doing plyometrics, they're doing all this accessory stuff, they're lifting with like such intent, and I'm like, that's training. If I could advise anyone to get into a type of training, I'm like Olympic lifting, because they just cover so much.
I do agree. I think it's a really amazing like niche from that lifting community, and I think like the stuff I was saying before, in my mind's eye, I'm thinking like gym bros, just hitting the bench,
bodybuilders or powerlifters,
basically. Because you're right, and I think there is still within that, and obviously I have a biased opinion because I just think personally, for me, what it comes down to is I just think we have these natural abilities that we've lost, like entirely lost, and for me, it's like I'd just really love to just be back to what any human should be able to do, like pain-free and like without it feeling too taxing. And I'd still argue, and obviously with any athlete, they're going to become super specific to their niche because they need to in order to train hard enough and get their recovery, and they don't have time to do
at the elite side. But I think people look at the advice that's given to or by elites online, and they're like, that's what we got to do. Like if we want to do powerlifting, we got to squat 5 times a week to improve our squat. And then it's like, that worked for them, but like they are also elite at it. Like I look at like LeBron James or something, and like you look at his training, and it's like, well, like he is amazing at what he does. Should you copy him? Probably not. Not because like it might help you, his training, but like at the end of the day, he is elite and you are not. So you got to like not train like he does now. Maybe train like he did when he was like growing up, and it's like all the things that he was doing then to get to that level. And I just think online training stuff is twisted, and
I think it just doesn't take into account the individual. That's the issue with those kind of pre-made programming, or not pre-made necessarily, but as in like it's always skewed obviously to, like you said, like LeBron James also, like what's his recovery routine? Like I bet he gets like loads of hot and cold therapy. He's probably got a sports massage on call. He has a nutritionist. He probably doesn't prepare any of his own meals. Like there's a lot of other factors. We're just talking about the strength section, like let alone all the other things that are just as important. But I think what I love about what I do is what it comes down to me is like if I can build my foundation, if I can put the same level of effort that an Olympic lifter or LeBron James or whoever it is into just building my foundation, the rest will naturally come anyway. Because like we said, like squatting and deadlifting it's not hard. Like, out of the movements we're trying to do, they are some of the easiest ones we can do. The reason people find them so difficult is because all of their supporting joints and muscles are way underdeveloped, and so you don't have an efficiency of movement because you're overly relying on certain muscle groups. And so what lights me up is this idea of like, if I can just like really boost all of my range of motion with strength at those M ranges and feel really loose, and like I can just throw my body into any shapes, then I don't need to worry so much, about like, is this too heavy to squat because my back's already really strong because I've been doing all of that stuff as well. Or, same with deadlifting, like my hips are going to be able to support me because I'm already doing loads of hip work. So I just kind of like to look at it the other way around.
Yeah.
But I know obviously that's very like for me because that's what I really enjoy.
I just think like people get too bogged down with like, oh, well, this is what so-and-so's doing. And it's like, but what do you need to do? What do they have that you don't? Not like their training plan, but like what strengths and qualities do they have? And like look at that and be like, can I improve that quality? Well, if you're like 5 foot and you're comparing yourself in basketball to LeBron James, there's probably the height that's a big difference. Can you work on that? Probably not. Okay, right. If you're the same height as him, but like his vertical jump's like 20 inches and yours is 5, can you work on your ability to jump high up? Yeah, you can work on your speed, your power, like do plyometrics, and it's like, but you're not doing that. You're just like, oh, well, he can squat this much, and it's like, there's a big difference. Like, there's that clip of what's his name, Mike Israetel, jumping recently.
No, I haven't seen it, but yeah.
So he jumps, and you look at him, and you're like, yeah, bodybuilding doesn't transfer to being like athletic. But then you look at like Sam Sulek, who's like an ex-diver, and you watch him diving at the size he is now, and it's like, oh, so you can be athletic and do that, but it's what you've trained for.
Yeah.
Mike Israetel hasn't trained to jump. Sam Sulek has trained to do double somersaults into a pool.
Yeah.
And it's like, but you need to train for it. You don't just be like, oh, well, he can squat this much, so if I just squat that much, then I can jump that high, because it's just a different quality.
Yeah, and there's no, there's also, like you're saying, like there's no guarantee you follow that other person's training plan. You're the same height, you're the same build, you've done exactly the same amount of lifts. Like that doesn't mean that your muscle fibers, like the fast twitch, is going to work as economically or as well as that person anyway. So you could even be pretty much a carbon copy, and you're still not guaranteed that. And I think what people miss is just this idea of within the kind of social media world is like, we see the result, we don't see the progress, because we're sold on results. We're not sold on, I'm just starting out with this thing, who wants to come with me? It's like, well, why would I come with you? We don't even know if you can do it yet. Yeah. And that's fine. Like, I understand that. But the issue we then have is like, the first issue is that person has put in way more training than they're going to show you, because they will forget naturally, like some of that stuff that they did, or they would have found better things along the way. But like you said, like with your parkour and stuff, you could end up in a world where you don't mention that to people. That's actually your basis, but we don't call that like training, because it's just like fun or exercise. And I also don't like that separation either. Like, we need to stop separating this idea of gym life and life, because it's all exercise, it's all training. But then you'd be like, oh yeah, well, I just started doing these squats and those things. But actually it's all that other stuff that's impacted where you've got to. And so I think that gets lost. And the other is that there's so many people out there who are they are naturally good at the thing that they've done. So they've picked a thing that they're already very good at. They've got a little bit better at it, and then they're offering their advice on it, which is fine, but it's very limited, because they haven't gone through all of the motions to get them to the stage that they're in, where they can coach somebody, which is different from like just offering like a training plan. Because with the coaching element, what it brings in is this idea of like, you're struggling with this thing, that's okay, let's try a different avenue. We've got these options, we've got lots of tools in the toolbox. Whereas if you fall in with someone who just naturally got it, they'll be like, well, you just need to do more of it, man. Like, come on, just up the weights. Because that's what works for them. They don't know all the other stuff. And so what I like about for me, one of the reasons of why I picked what I picked and what I've done is because I have gone through that process of like, I've tried this, it just didn't work. I've tried that didn't work. I've done this other thing. I've found the things. And obviously then you create your frameworks and systems, and then you try and bring in people that will work for.
Yeah.
But, those people obviously then need to work out if it's not for them, then that's okay. But to have that toolbox and offer it out is so important. But you're right, like people just are like looking at the training plan and going, all right, I need to do that.
Yeah.
It's like there's like 20 other steps before you're kind of like just fixing yourself on that thing.
I found it funny when you were saying about like, just because you've got something naturally doesn't mean you can coach it. Because I found that when I was coaching gymnastics, there's a move on vault called a squat through, where you put your hands down and your legs go in between your arms. In free running, we call it a Kong. And I picked that up, like, I didn't pick it up quickly, but like that's one of the first things you learn in free running. And I'd done that like years ago when I was quite young. And then like 15 years later, I'm now coaching gymnastics, and that was the one thing I really struggled to coach kids, because I was just like, well, you just do this, and then they couldn't get it. And I'm like, how do I don't remember how I learned that. I remember learning it, but I don't remember how. And I couldn't coach that. And it's such a simple move, and I couldn't coach it. But you gave me like a really hard vault, like a Sukahara, where you bounce off your hands and do a back somersault over a vault. And I'm like, I can coach that. And it always baffled me, because I was like, well, I've gone through the coaching process and I've learned all these different things and I've used it on other people to try and get that. But then when it's come to like my progression, like, because I could just do that, I now can't coach that thing. And I found that hilarious, because like,
yeah. And I think like for me, when you reach that, because that does happen, right? Like, so some of my clients, they've come to me with a specific issue, they've gone through that, and then they stay with me because they want to keep doing other stuff. And if they come to me and they're like, oh, I really want to do X, Y, Z, and it's not my area of expertise, the first thing I say is like, I'm on board with this. This is awesome. I've not done this before, but we're going to do it together, and I'll go away, obviously, and try and research all the different techniques.
Yeah.
But then it does come into trial and error. And I have a mindset where I enjoy that. Like, I enjoy working that out, the process of like, how can I break this down for you into bit by bit by bit? It's obviously something I can do, but it's just the way you coach it that can be tricky for some people, because like you said, like you just say, well, you just do it like this. And they go, but I can't get my arm to do that thing. And you're like, oh, okay. How do we solve this problem? And I love problem solving. It's like a big thing that makes my brain tick. And so you just start to kind of like pull it apart. And again, it comes back to the kind of work I already do, which is that reverse engineering. And you think, okay, well, if you can't do that thing, we need to work out how we can simplify it so you can do this one thing. And then when you can do that thing, you can do the next thing. And that might bring up a new issue, and then you pull it apart. But I think as long as people understand that this is the same process that anyone else would go through, obviously then to have coaching yourself to know how to coach it is important. But yeah, if I'm ever in that situation, I'm always just really honest, and I'm just like, this is going to be a journey for both of us. Some people like that, like they enjoy that the same way I enjoy that. Yeah. Obviously I don't do it with anything that's like massively technical or like, risk of injury. But yeah, I think it's a really interesting part of coaching, that ability to dissect and offer it in different ways for different people. I mean, that is what coaching is.
I think that's the difference, and I see this with like a lot of coaches where they'll just try and coach the same things the same way to different people, and that's just because that's how they've coached, that's how they've been coached, that's how they've always coached people, that's how they've understood something, and then they struggle when people don't get that. Whereas like, I think it's good as a coach to like my athletes have started realizing this now, where I use them to like test things, and I'm like, if I'm doing this just for me and I'm trying out this new movement, well, then I'm a subject of one, and it's going to take me a while to figure it out. If I've got 10 test subjects and I'm just like putting this one exercise in all of your plans, and you see each other doing it around the gym, and like I've now got 10 people that I'm like, well, this is working for them but not for them, and then it's like I've got loads more data in a shorter amount of time, and I'm just like, this is perfect, and I love doing that. And yeah, some of them, like, at first they saw me doing that and they were like, how comes we've all got the same thing? And they're a bit like, and then I'm like, I'm experimenting. Some people, it takes like a little while for them to like understand and get on board with that, because they're like, you should know this. And it's like, does everyone know everything? No.
But also I think it comes down to, like ringing it all back, but it's like it comes down to that growth thing again. It's like, but if you want a coach, that's just them. They're never going to improve, so you're never going to improve. Surely you want a coach who's also improving their methods and trying new things and developing and growing. And part of that growing is, testing things out, trying different things. And like, I think as long as the client is happy and aware of things that are happening, if they need to be, I think it's brilliant, because ultimately, long term, they all get better results because you're using your knowledge and your experience to improve your systems and processes and ideas. And then once they're improved, you're then delivering them to the clients.
Yeah.
So otherwise, you either end up with someone who's just a level 3 PT with a level 4 strength and conditioning, and that's that. And they are doing it 20 years later and they're delivering the same quality as they were 20 years ago. Or you're with someone who's like doing these things and testing and improving, and also there's new information coming out all the time. So what you're learning or have learned at one period of time is completely different.
Yeah.
So then you have to start applying those new ideas, and you need to build up experience with that. So it's really natural part of coaching, I think.
Yeah. You do see, like, I see a lot of coaches that don't tend to do that, and like you're saying, their clients don't get, in my eyes, their clients don't get the results they deserve. Like, they will get to a certain point, and if they're happy with that, fine. That's when, like, I never tell people to just go with me, even if people are inquiring. I'm like, well, these are your options. And if people come to me, like we were saying earlier, like, it's easy to take things personally as well. Like, if someone's gone to someone else, it's like, well, why not me? Or if someone's come to you and they've almost outgrown you and they leave, like, I'm actually really supportive of that. But, like, I just like to make sure that I'm pointing them in the right direction. Like, if someone's come to me to perform a certain way and they do that, and then they get to a point where they might want to get into, like, your, like, movement, like, animal movement stuff, and I'm just going to be like, honestly, I'm not really that into that. Like, I think it's cool. I'll do, like, a bit of it. But if you want to, like, really learn about it, like, go to Neil. Or it will be like, if you want to get into, like, triathlon, like, go here. Like, I'm not the guy for that. Like, if you want me to still be that guy, like, I'll try and learn, like you were saying, like, I'll try and develop those skills. But yeah, if you're really looking to progress that really quickly, like, yeah, that's not me.
Yeah,
same. And you've got to be happy to do that as a coach.
Same. Yeah. And also, I mean, for me, it's even more like I'm very niche down in terms of pretty much everyone I work with come to me originally with some kind of pain or injury. So it's really common for me to have people be no longer in pain and injury and go, cool, thanks, Neil, I'm done. And like, I have to just take that as like, wicked, I've done my job.
Yeah.
Like,
it's a really bad business model.
Yeah, it's terrible, isn't it?
It's really good, like, for yourself, and just being like, I've done a good job, but fuck, I've lost out on
I mean, I obviously like encourage them to then use their new movement to, progress further and do other things. And so most of my clients do stay, but occasionally, I do just have people and they're like, look, I just came to get this thing sorted and it's been really good. And they know the exercises they can do to do maintenance and, but like you said, it's like, it's the honesty, isn't it? Saying, look, ultimately that is all you need to do. I'm not gonna pretend like you've got to there's a better exercise and whatever. If I can pretty much guarantee if you have like this, basically I have this mobility maintenance list. So it's like, if you can do these at a certain percentage of your body weight, you're pretty much like, you can't guarantee anything, but you're in a really good place to know that pain's not coming back because you've built up that strength layer. And so at some stage I share that with my clients and go, look, this is the target we're really trying to hit now. And then when you hit that, we can do maintenance. And then at that point, if you want to start doing some other stuff, like some more fun stuff, like bigger lifts or calisthenics stuff, then that's cool. And we can start doing that. And we'll just keep revisiting every now and again and make sure we're still at maintenance. But yeah, unfortunately, at some point, some people are like, cool, got the list, I know what the percentages are, I'm good, I'll do that on my own. And I'm like, cool, that's fine.
Yeah.
What you were saying about, I'm having total brain freeze, the journey of clients in terms of what were you talking about? Don't know, it's totally gone from my brain.
It's all right, it happens. I do it all the time. Let's talk about your podcast. I think this is a good time to bring it up because you're starting a podcast, and yours is a bit different to mine right now because mine's interview based. You're doing it just you to start with.
Yes.
What you said, you've recorded 2 episodes?
Yeah, I mean, one's an introduction, so that's like a half episode.
Okay. What's the other episode then? So we got an introduction. What's the other episode about?
So the first episode is about sitting. So I came across an article called "Is Sitting the New Smoking?" and it just was like classic clickbait, and I was like, I gotta read this. But it really started triggering, some ideas in my head about this stuff. So yeah, basically the podcast's called Built Human, and it's basically looking at like modern issues that have come around from the modern way we live that are trying to be solved through modern technologies or just ignored completely. I would attribute this to things that are like issues with nutrition, with diet, with rise in sugars, processed foods, the amount of sitting we're doing, the amount of time we're spending indoors, which is like completely polar reversed from, we're now like 8-9 hours indoors. We should be like 8-9 outside. All these kind of issues, but there's just so many technologies out there that's like, here's a problem that is purely Western and like modern. So here's a technology we've used to solve it. It's like, or we could just all go and spend more time outdoors or try and pick a job that allows us to not work night shifts. Or, there's a lot of better solutions than technological modern solutions. And that's basically what the podcast's about.
Nice.
A lot of it is then delving into the history, obviously, of like where we've come from as hunter-gatherers, where we've kind of lost it along the way. And we've touched on a little bit of that actually today, probably just because it's a massive interest of mine. But so this first episode is basically about sitting. And so in every episode, I basically look at a problem or a kind of current thought experiment that's going on. Look at the history of like where it's come from, then talk about how that's impacting our health, why it's impacting our health from a scientific point of view, if there's studies out there, looking at some of the facts and the real data on it, and then offering solutions, but trying to make those kind of natural based solutions that are more in line with our ancestry and in how we would have lived before essentially modern technology came along. Yeah. And then there's like, it's an interesting one starting a new podcast because you have ideas and you don't know if they're good or bad because you have no one to float them to, especially if you're doing it on your own. But yeah, I think one of my goals is just to try and not make it too heavy. Some of the stats are really striking and quite depressing, really, of how we've got to this stage. So really trying to like counter that with a bit of fun and obviously making it actionable with solution-based opportunities. And got like a little section that kind of looks at one of my ideas. I can float this to you. Here we go. Is I've got this thing called Gadget or Gimmick, where we basically look at one new technology that's come along and whether actually it's just like a complete waste of money or not, which I think is quite fun.
Nice little segment there.
Yeah. And then the main thing is that basically within every episode, I'm going to set one small challenge of something people can start actioning. And my goal with that is to make it so simple that people really can't say no. Basically, if someone's like, I don't have time for that, then that's like, they just basically are not interested in prioritizing that as a thing in their life, which is fair enough. But yeah, so the brief synopsis of Is Sitting the New Smoking is we all really need to be squatting more. We've lost our ability to squat. And the solution, if you make it to the end, is to plug your phone in on the floor, Shouldn't be by your bed anyway. I'm a massive advocate of not having your mobile phone in your bedroom. But if it is, or anywhere else in the house, put it somewhere on the floor so that when you wake up in the morning and you go and unplug that phone, you can just squat down and pick it up. Like, it could be that simple.
Yeah.
And a lot of these things are small, actionable steps daily that build up to massive results. And it's the same really with a lot of my coaching as well. When you're dealing with acute pains and injuries, it's like, you know this anyway, like even if it's just strength building, it's actually the small committed things that build the big differences. You know, skipping one PB day of trying to lift the heaviest you can isn't going to make that much difference in the grand scheme of all your training in life. It's about turning up every week and actually doing something.
Yeah.
And I think it's the same. And I think the problem we have now is not knowledge. There is so much knowledge out there. People are overwhelmed with choice. That's the issue. And so people are paralyzed and they don't know what they should do because this person's saying this thing, this person's saying something else. And I'm very aware that creating another podcast is adding to the noise. So the goal was to then reduce that noise within the podcast for people that become part of that community, so that actually it's like, here's a few things that will help with this issue, but here's one thing to just start doing. Just make it nice and simple.
I like it. I can't wait for it to come out. When is it coming out and where can people find it?
So it it officially has already started because it is available on Spotify. It's called Built Human, and it's under my name, Niall Newport. Neil is spelt Niall, Niall, confusingly. It is there if people want to go and start watching it. So there is the intro and the first episode. My plan is to do one episode every other week. So this is an official launch right now because I was just going to try and get a few episodes along before I launched it. But the launch date has not been set. Let's say November 1st. Yeah. But actually it's already there. So if you want to, you can go and listen.
Well, this is going to be coming out not next week after. So it'll be like mid-October by then. Okay, so
if I I'll quickly go and record a load of other episodes and get them up there.
Get a couple of episodes out. You got 2 weeks to get some episodes out. So.
I love deadlines. That's good. That's how you get stuff done.
There we go. You got a deadline. So if you guys want to go listen to that, like I'm gonna listen to it today, 100%.
Thank you.
You got your first listener here, so yeah, I'm gonna go listen. If you guys want to go listen, I will encourage it. Don't usually try and encourage my competition with podcasting, but no, it's good. I'm excited for it. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you for coming on as well. I think we'll wrap it up here. And yeah, like I look forward to seeing what you get up to.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. And then, like I said before, I'll be pretty keen to get you on mine as well. Get you back
I'm
on.
up for it.
So yeah, it'll be good.
Nice one. Thanks again for listening to another episode of the Adventure Athletes podcast. Definitely recommend heading over to Neil's YouTube and his Spotify so you can head over and listen to his podcast. Find out more about why sitting is the new smoking, or maybe why it's not. Now, this podcast is made possible by you guys, the listeners, and I'm really trying to push for listeners at the moment. We've had over 100 episodes now, and it's all completely free. I've never made anyone pay and will never make anyone pay to listen to the podcast. This is all done just because I love sharing information, I love sharing stories and getting as much good content out there as possible. But I'd really love if you guys could share it around, help spread the word of the Adventure Athletes podcast, get as many listeners as we can. We've hit over 600 listeners in a month, but I really want to hit that 1,000 listeners in a month benchmark. And then hopefully one day get 1,000 listeners on a single episode, but I know we're a little way off that yet. So I'll take 1,000 in a month. So the more you guys like, share, talk about the podcast as much as you can, literally like just go around telling everyone about it, and then keep sending me guest requests. Who do you want to hear from? The more you guys get the people you want to hear from, probably the more listeners that we're going to get anyway. So just keep sending me guests to talk to. Generally I don't plan anything from a request. If someone's sent in a request, I try and just book them on, and I do zero research. So the questions I ask and my responses are very genuine in the moment, because sometimes I honestly have no idea on who I'm even talking to. So it's quite an interesting dynamic. But yeah, if you guys want to spread it, please do, and I'll catch you at the next one.